Well, welcome, commissioners, to our 30th meeting of the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling. We'll go ahead and start the meeting today with a call out to make sure we have a quorum. I'll start with Commissioner Bouchard. Are you here? I think we missed him at the last meeting. I do not see him, so it looks like we might have an absent there. Commissioner Cadena? Are you here? Okay. Missing Commissioner Cadena. Commissioner Davis, I see you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Commissioner Dell is here from London. And Commissioner Dunleavy, I believe I saw you.
Here, good morning.
Good morning. And Commissioner Ferrante. Shion. Missing. Okay. And Commissioner Kalpakoff, I see you. Good morning.
I'm here. Good morning.
Great. Commissioner Lapis, I believe I cannot see you, but I can see.
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Medrano.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Segura.
Good morning.
Great. Good morning. Myself, Commissioner Schneider. Okay, I'm not seeing Commissioner Schneider. Commissioner Sky.
I'm here.
I don't see Commissioner Sky. Commissioner Toyota. Oh no, there he is. Commissioner Sky, I see you.
Yeah, and I said I'm here.
Okay, there you go. And then Vice Chair Valier said he would join us at about 9:30. And then Commissioner Ward, I see you. So I'll go back up. Commissioner Bouchard has joined us. Thank you for making it, Commissioner Bouchard.
Morning.
Good morning. And then Commissioner Cadena, I'll double check, and Ferrante and Schneider. Are we still missing all those? Okay, so we do have a quorum, but we are missing at this point Commissioner Cadena, Ferrante, Schneider, and Valier we know will be joining us at 9:30. If anybody knows them and can text them to make sure they're getting on or let us know if they can't, that would be great. So good morning. I just want to start by first welcoming Jennifer White from Cal Recycle. She is our new liaison. She just got hired and she will be taking care of our support today. I also would like to start by saying that we've had a very busy year, and my sense is that everybody is getting really tired. And it's, I just want to put it out there that I think this commission worked really hard last year. And then when we took our 2-month quote unquote break, we ended up with basically all of us lobbying bills individually, that a lot of them that were ideas from this commission. And then we jumped right back into meetings. And I can just sense that everybody's getting a little tired, and we're coming into 2 months of our holiday season. And so we can discuss today what is a reasonable pace to keep everybody together and happy, and what are reasonable expectations for this commission for December and for the June report next year. I'll just throw out that I think we need to really pace ourselves and make sure that we can do the good work that we do and make sure we don't rush anything. And we can discuss that today on items for a future agenda. But I did want to just throw out there that I'm definitely getting the sense everybody's getting really tired and pulled in a lot of directions. And that's okay. We are, and we're a volunteer commission. So just wanted to start out by saying that. I also wanted to start by reminding the public that you can submit your comments through the public portal. That's how the whole world gets to see them. And we really appreciate your help, but please keep them brief and to the point. That would help us all move through these meetings as quickly as possible. So we'll go now to agenda item number 2, which is review and potential approval of the meeting notes from our last commission meeting of the 20th. Does anyone have any comments on the meeting minutes from the last meeting? And I see we have Commissioner Cadena has arrived, so thank you. I'm glad you could make it. So now we're down Commissioners Ferrante, Schneider, and Valle missing at this point. Okay, so are there any comments on the meeting minutes, or do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, great. All those commissioners, aye or thumbs up if you're okay with the meeting minutes.
Aye.
Great. Is
Aye.
there anybody who is not okay with these meeting minutes or have any changes? And Commissioner Schneider just joined us. Welcome, Commissioner Schneider. Are you okay with the meeting minutes, Commissioner Schneider? I'm not sure if
Yes.
you're very
Yes,
good.
sorry. Problem
Thank you.
logging in.
Okay, very good. So we'll move on from that. And now we're moving on to agenda item number 3, public comment review for items not on the agenda. And I'd like to ask if Jennifer could read us any public comments that have arrived in the last, let's say, 24 hours to make sure everybody's had a chance.
Good morning, Chair Sternborn. We do have 2 unread comments from the October 20th meeting. Both are published and available through the public comment portal. Would you like those read as well?
May I ask who they're from and what the topic was, just so we all know?
The first comment is from Diana Conway from Safe Healthy Playing Fields Incorporated.
Oh.
And the second comment is from Diane Wolke from Safe Healthy Playing Fields also.
Okay. I think these are related to the AstroTurf, or the, what do they call it? Not AstroTurf anymore. They call it synthetic turf discussion. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. That is on the agenda, actually. So would it be, I think it would be more helpful if we could read those before Commissioner Schneider and Commissioner Ward talk about single-use plastics, if that's okay with the other commissioners, so that we kind of hear that right before we start talking about that topic. It is on the agenda, though. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that then. And we thank you for your comments, because we know we discussed a lot about synthetic turf. Those comments are published on the website as well. Are there any other comments coming in?
Correct. There are 3 comments. They look, the first one is from Jackie Nunez from the Last Plastic Straw and Plastic Pollution Coalition. It looks like it's associated with agenda item 6.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and read it to make sure everybody's heard it, even though it's.
Okay, so my name is Jackie Nunez. I am the founder of the Last Plastic Straw and the Advocacy Program Manager for Plastic Pollution Coalition. I have currently been made aware of agave straws on the market throughout California. Currently, there are many agave straw companies selling poly-agave products, whose parent company is BioSolutions, that they are sharing the biodegradability, recyclability claims of the material. Article on BioSolutions targeting the US market. A website is provided and it's published on the website.
Okay, great. So I would, before you move on, I'd like to refer that to Commissioners Ward and Schneider, a single-use plastics issue, but it really is also a labeling issue that we're constantly seeing new products that are being labeled as compostable, recyclable, that may not be. So are there any thoughts from the commissioners? Commissioner Ward, would you be okay taking that one as part of this? Okay, very good. So we're going to refer that to the 2-person committee on single-use plastics. Thank you very much. And the next
the rest of that comment though was the CEO of BioSolutions, Anna Laborde. These are some of the claims that are made by companies selling poly-agave straws, eco-agave, biodegradables in 100 days in, and that's the end of the 150 words of the comment.
Yep, thank you very much. That's referred.
The second comment is from Colleen Foster from City of Oceanside. We believe it's related to agenda item 7, but I can read that if you'd like.
Okay, let's go ahead and read it.
Okay. A statewide education campaign would help resolve inconsistency issues in regards to what's recyclable and what's not. Before developing, it's imperative that the state works with all processors to identify what is able to be recycled versus what is unable to be recycled. For example, some haulers that are in proximity to each other have differences in the items that they are able to recycle. Consistency and accuracy of what is being recycled is important to ensure a level playing field amongst all processors. Without this, a statewide education campaign will fall short due to the nuances amongst processors. End of comment.
Okay, thank you. And the last comment, and I see we have a question from Commissioner Lapis. Commissioner Lapis?
Yeah, quick question on the agave straws. That seems like a pretty clear-cut example of improper labeling, and I thought Jan was setting up a two-person committee to send notices to folks who are labeled improperly. So that might be a better place for this.
It's up to the commission. I didn't hear any other comments. So if Commissioner Dell, did you want to speak to that?
Right. I think, is this on the agenda? The idea of writing letters to producers has stalled after, is this on the agenda to discuss later, Commissioner Sanborn?
Yeah, all the two-person committees. In fact, I put you first since we didn't get to last time, so.
Okay, well, we can address it then. The concept of writing to producers has currently stalled, so we'll talk about it then.
Great, thanks.
In the meantime, I think we'll at least have the single-use plastics team work on it, but we should definitely, it's two issues. So maybe just have it come up again under the labeling group. And then I see a comment from Commissioner Osagura.
Is it okay to comment on the public comment?
Oh, of course, yeah.
I just thought it is an important comment made by the City of Oceanside regarding outreach and ensuring that there is stakeholder involvement from the cities and others so that we do have a productive and effective outreach program. I would hate, and I think we had the discussion previously, I would hate a state outreach program that occurs without additional input and that does not truly impact the understanding and the education of constituents, whether those are residential, commercial, multifamily. And so I just want to, I guess, echo what was said by the City of Oceanside, which I think is important.
I agree, and I think well, that is under agenda item 7, and Zoe from CalRecycle will be here to present and take more comments, and we did post their PowerPoint from the last meeting on this meeting in the Google Doc, so you can all take a look at that and be ready to give more feedback to CalRecycle. Okay, do we have another comment then?
Correct. The last comment is also from Colleen Foster, City of Oceanside. I support every aspect outlined in the single-use plastic policy strategies overview, but there needs to be additional direction and recommendations on creating a policy strategy that incorporates the creation of markets for post-consumer plastic resins, not just for producer responsibility, and education/engagement to producers, investors, institutions. In regard to single-use plastics policy strategy, deposit and redemption, if similar to the bottle bill, would this be funding mechanisms for cities? How would cities be able to use these funds? Bottle bill funds in past have not been effective to reduce litter or reduce the consumption of targeted materials. In this case, single-use plastics derived from a pre-consumer plastic resins. In regards to the single-use plastics policy strategy, product or function bans or restrictions, jurisdictions ban put the burden on municipalities who must then jump through hoops to implement within their city. Product or function bans or restrictions are needed, but should be coming in from, that is the end of the 150 words. The full comment is published.
I think I'll refer that one probably to Commissioners Tadward and Schneider again. And I know you know Colleen, and we'll be able to reach out to her with any questions and suggestions. Are there any other public comments?
At this time, no, there's no other public comments.
Okay, so before we start the agenda item on with Commissioners Ward and Schneider on single-use plastics, we will read the 2 comments about the synthetic turf issue at that point, so we can have it all together on that discussion. All right, well, thank you very much. So we are now at 9:14, moving on to agenda item 4. So we are ahead of schedule, thank you. And this is about the data review and requests of the commission and having CalRecycle respond to those requests. I did post on the Google document the response that we got from CalRecycle on at least one of our data requests on the 29th. And this is about the mislabeled products and what enforcement has been done in California on products that are mislabeled as recyclable or compostable. And does CalRecycle have existing enforcement authority in this area? Their response, I just want to make sure everybody, even in the audience, has seen this, is that CalRecycle is providing a response based on the regulations currently and not on the bills that just passed. But under the Rigid Plastic Packaging Container Program, the RPPC statutes do not provide the department with the authority to take enforcement actions regarding products that may be mislabeled as recyclable. So that's important for us all to know, that the RPPC program does not have any enforcement authority on labeling. The other one is that CalRecycle has no enforcement authority, nor does it keep information about enforcement generally regarding the PRC 42355 through 42358.5, which is relevant to SB 567 and AB 2287. The specific prohibitions on mislabeling products as compostable are at the PRC code, Business and Professions Code, prohibit false environmental advertising claims, which would include recyclability claims. These statutes give Recycle no enforcement role. As for what enforcement has been done, enforcement actions under PRC would be taken by cities, counties, the Attorney General, and not CalRecycle. CalRecycle does not, nor can it, maintain a comprehensive information regarding such efforts across the many jurisdictions with enforcement authority. Similarly, to the extent litigation between private litigants pursuant to the B&P code sections referenced above constitutes enforcement efforts, CalRecycle has no involvement in such cases and does not maintain information regarding them either. So that is a very thoughtful response to our inquiry around data on enforcement of mislabeled products. It's very clear from their response that they do not do it. They can't do it. And this really is left up to the counties and the AG. Is there anyone who would like to respond to this or comment on this response to our data request? Commissioner Dell?
Yes, we also made a data request to CalRecycle regarding whether the commission could write to producers and ask them to correct labels. And I believe that's more than a month old now, and I haven't seen a response. Is there a response from CalRecycle?
The only other response I got from CalRecycle was on Tuesday, October 26th. And their data request, just to summarize to us about what we asked for, was the survey results from the education and outreach campaign, asking CalRecycle if they can make a public announcement to the state that people should not be bagging recyclable bags. Is that allowed, and will CalRecycle do it? Asking CalRecycle if they can make a public announcement. Oh, sorry. There was a lot of discussion on this, and they were saying they weren't clear that that was a data request. So I'm going to actually ask at all these meetings that they summarize at the end what we've asked them to do, so it's in the record and everybody's 100% clear. And then the October 6th data request about advanced chemical recycling has been dropped. So they did not apparently catch that. And so Zoe, I just would like to, if you're on, if you could respond to this or let us know if you did catch that data request, because I thought it was asked for, as Commissioner Bell mentioned.
Yeah, and I have a response. Would you like me to provide it now or during the 2%?
No, this would be very helpful.
Sure. So Jan, thank you for asking. And yeah, we have a response for you. So we recognize that the commission has a commitment and passion, and that's the intent behind doing this. CalRecycle also recognizes and respects the independence of the commission and its unique statutory role as an advisory body to CalRecycle. As such, CalRecycle will defer our respective independent roles and encourage the commission to carefully consider its role when determining whether letters to industry fall within its statutorily mandated authority pursuant to PRC 4205.5. So that's our response, just once again, maintaining our independent roles and just encouraging you all to review your statutory authority and see how this fits in.
Okay, so be clear, you're not, you're telling us it's up to us to review the statute and decide if we have the authority. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, and then the second, would that also apply to if the commission were to write a letter to the state attorney general? Would that be the same response?
That would be the same response, yes.
And back to the point about the plastic bags, that was a data request. Do we have to make it again that we are asking if Cal Recycle is willing now to, as part of a statewide education committee or statewide education fund function, tell people not to put recyclables in plastic bags before they put it in their curbside bin? Will Cal Recycle make such a statement?
Jan, I think the response to that is we're right now reviewing all of the feedback that you've provided us. We went through, and I'll address this more during the agenda item, but we went through it, rewatched the video, cataloged all of the input that you all provided, which was significant and really, really helpful. And we'll be considering it as we're moving forward and developing out the statewide education campaign. So I don't have a direct response to that as far as yes and no, but just to acknowledge that it's certainly something we're considering along with all of the other data requests. And just to echo some of Maria's sentiment last week is, we've got to be careful about how we're addressing certain material types and that we're consistent across the board within our authority, within the input that we're receiving, and then to some of the points that were made earlier today, ensuring that we're consistent and not overstepping any jurisdictional direction to constituents. So it's something that we're looking at and we're trying to figure out. The state has an interesting role in California in that there's so much local control. So as we're determining the statewide messaging, how we do that within our authority, but to be as effective as possible, utilizing all of the input that you've provided as well as other stakeholders. So apologies that I can't give a direct response, but I do want to let you know that we are paying attention to all of the recommendations that you're all providing.
And we have that on the agenda at the end too, so we get into maybe more detail at that point. And I see Commissioner Don Levy, and then Ward, and then Davis, please.
Yes, thank you. Just a request for Zoe and Cal Recycle staff, maybe at the next meeting, just an update on filling the open spot for Commissioner Potashner. Definitely well respected, very knowledgeable. I think the more knowledge and skill that we add to the commission, the better we are. So just an update moving forward on the open spot and efforts to fill it.
I can provide that now, if that's appropriate. Okay, yeah, so at this time, the director will not be appointing a 17th commissioner. She's reviewed her responsibility as far as the commission and making appointments. And at the end of the first 2 years, she'll review the makeup of the commission and see how it aligns with the statutory requirements and make decisions about future appointments at that juncture. So more to come, and that's our thought for the current makeup of the commission, just to ensure there's that representation from the 3 statutorily required sectors, and to take a look at that at the end of the first 2 years.
Thank you. I'm sure everybody wanted to know that, so I'm glad I got that answered. Thank you.
Through the
Commissioner
chair.
Ward? Oh, well,
Chair, sorry, Commissioner Schneider, was that 2 years or 3 years?
She will be reviewing at the end of the first 2 years.
Thank you. Thank you. I misheard.
Sure.
Commissioner Ward and then Commissioner Davis.
I just wanted to reiterate that something Commissioner Dell has said many times, that without clear modes of enforcement against mislabeling, then the work of this commission advising about where to draw those lines is very hollow, it feels, as you got to have it there somehow. So I just want to reiterate for everybody, unless we have clear responsibilities and repercussions for enforcement, that all of our recommendations are hampered without.
An excellent point, and I say that about every law. Don't pass them unless there's strong enforcement. Otherwise, it's really almost pointless. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, just I read the response. There's another public resources code, section 42281 and 81.5 that actually directly addresses reusable bags. You know, I don't see specific enforcement for CalRecycle in there, but it wasn't part of their memo, and it actually covers the recycled content as well as the labeling of reusable bags. So I guess I would ask if we could clarify as well on that section, because I think that's very pertinent to what we've been discussing.
Commissioner Davis, this is Laura Moreno from CalRecycle. Can you repeat the PRC codes again, just so we can get them correct?
Yeah, PRC 42281 and 42281.5.
Zoe, did you have any immediate response to that, or should we just ask the full commission if we all support that as a commission's data request?
I don't have one right now, but that should be relatively simple for us to be able to run down for you.
Okay, so unless I see any opposition to making that request, we'll assume everybody's okay with that as an official request of the commission. By Commissioner Davis on the bags. Okay, great. So there you have a new request on data. Are there any other comments or questions about this agenda item, data requests, that you think we need to ask for? But I feel much more clear that, and again, being a volunteer commission without legal advice, we basically have to be lawyers and reading the PRC to make sure we stay within the lines. So we'll do our best. And Commissioner Lapis.
Yeah, a quick question for Zoe on the timing of the survey data.
Oh, we will be getting that to you very shortly. Yeah, I believe they're just OPA is just preparing it so that we can send it out to the commission.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
Right, and we'll post that on the Google document so everybody can see it as well, or maybe you could post it even on the CalRecycle page, depending on the accessibility issues. Everybody has it. Okay, fantastic. Well then, I think that is it for this agenda item, unless anybody else has any other comments or public comments. Very good. So we'll go ahead and move on from item 4. We're on time to agenda item number 5, which is the next meeting and agenda items for future meetings. And the reason we pulled this to the top is because we did not get to it at the last meeting. And Commissioner Don Levy had some very specific things he wanted to raise with the commission. So I want to make sure he has time to bring that up today, as well as any other commissioners, making sure that we are planning thoughtfully about really realistically also as far as how much time we have to dedicate to this commission, what we want to get done in December and June. So Commissioner Don Levy, we'll start with you.
All right, thank you. Not really prepared to review those today. I thought with emails, communications with you, Commissioner Sanborn, that it was going to be delayed until the next meeting agenda.
No, what I had said to you was that this is the place to bring it up, is at the public meeting. And I had offered to have it in writing so that the commissioners could review it and then have comment. But my personal position on this is that I would like to move the items that are not pertinent to us getting the report done in December to January. And these are discussions that you had raised around terms of service and who's the chair and voting and things like that. So, but it's not my decision to make, it's the commission's decision to make. So that is where I left it. So feel free to bring up anything you wish to discuss.
Okay. The items that I would like the commission to discuss is commission appointments. We're 2-year appointees. I'd like to talk about, do we set term limits? So maybe it's 2 consecutive terms that we're on here. for a maximum of 4, so we don't have this commission become a legacy commission with people that are on here for 6, 8, 10 years, things like that. Then with the chair position, also looking at that is a rotating seat. Many city councils, county supervisor boards, they rotate the seat, so it gives everybody the opportunity to basically be the chair of the commission for a period at a time. And then the next one would be commission time and staff. This is a volunteer committee, but I think there should be some discussion on having budget assigned, so Cal Recycle staff can help commissioners do a lot of the work that's being done, I'll say, in the private sector by either the companies or the nonprofits that we work for. So allocating budget so staff can do that work. Any of the stuff that's getting posted up on the Google Docs, I think that should all be hosted on a state system. So it's not on a private offline system. And then I think we should have a discussion about commission time being a paid time. Maybe it's a meeting stipend of a certain amount to pay for our time that's on the commission. And then talking about paying for travel and expenses, because at some point we are going to be meeting again. So those are the 2 items that I'd like to talk about in the future.
Okay, thank you. I think, let's see. I think who was next? I'm looking, I think it's Commissioner Sky, then Medrano and Schneider.
Thank you. So just building on that and share some of your comments at the start of this meeting. I hope that we can briefly talk about some of those issues about how we structure the work of the commission. I think it's important to focus on what's going to be in the next report and the policies, because I do think those are the most important issues. I feel like who serves on the commission is largely a function of Cal Recycle. They made all of our appointments, and I expect they would be deciding who would continue to serve, what the terms would be. If there are term limits, we should consider our own ability to continue serving. I would say that I hope we can keep these meetings to 3 hours, although we can certainly schedule for longer. And if we can try to build out the agenda to have a little bit of padding, but also a little bit more discipline in how we manage the items, so we're not perpetuating conversations where we're repeating the same topics and go way over time. It's probably good that this item is moved up on the agenda, because way too often we don't give enough time for the last, I think, 2 or 3 items that are on our agenda regularly. And so I just want to support the chair in cutting off discussion so that we make sure we get to every important agenda item.
Thank you. And then Commissioner Medrano and then Schneider.
Suggestion for a future agenda, if the commission is willing to review the recommendations that perhaps were not picked up as legislation, to see what we would like to perhaps further recommend for the legislature.
I think that is exactly what we're doing on the 2-person committees. And also there's going to be a request from Commissioner Ward and I that everybody who were the primary authors of any policy in the last report take a look at that policy and make sure, give us feedback, hopefully by next Wednesday or no later than the last Wednesday of this month, for the next report to update it based on what happened in the legislature. Because we have to, if we in December give them back a report, we need to be clear about what we think got done and did not get done from the last version of policies. So that's what we were thinking about. We can discuss that more under that next agenda item. So I think we're thinking along the same line. Commissioner Schneider and then Lapis, please. Commissioner Schneider, I can't hear you. Can't hear you. There you go.
Can you hear me? Okay. Under the topic of commission makeup and term limits, I would only encourage the powers that be that they kind of, I've just lost my term, that they split us up. You don't want all brand new people all at one time. You've lost institutional memory. So you want to rotate that around. And in terms of term limits as an elected official, where I am termed out in 2024, I assumed that if I'm still on the commission, then I would be removed because I would no longer be wearing quite the same hat on that. So I see the need for rotating, but just keep in mind that some of us may just logically come off.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lapis?
Yeah, on that same issue, I want to highlight that I think that there's value in considering term limits. I think there's value in relooking at the composition so it's not static over time. But I just reread the statute again, and I just want to be clear. CalRecycle's authority was to appoint a commission. They did not have the authority to remove people. 2-year terms were nowhere in the statute. And I think that's an important distinction, because if CalRecycle is able to remove commissioners and replace them, then it kind of eliminates the independence of the commission. And so, any decisions we want to make about how we govern ourselves are decisions we make for ourselves. I don't think we are bound by anything like CalRecycle decides at this point, with the exception of, they do have the explicit authority to appoint people to the commission. There's an opening, and so it is the director's prerogative when and how to appoint somebody to fill that opening. But once somebody's appointed, I don't think they actually have authority to remove us.
That's interesting. Thank you. Commissioner Osigura.
I mean, I guess for me, I think we should be careful in terms of, the reasoning behind why we would consider this. I understand, folks saying new ideas and refreshment, et cetera, but I think it's also important to look at the track record and what has been done. I think the commission has been successful in moving things forward. I believe that as Nick mentioned, that's not, I guess, in what was written in the law regarding the positions. I think if people feel they're being productive and are moving things forward, I think they should be able to remain if they like. And for those folks that do not, then they can make a decision to move from the commission. But I think change for change itself, I don't necessarily think that sometimes is good policy. As was mentioned by another commissioner, I think it's important to have institutional knowledge. And once again, the commission has been successful in moving things forward. We've been doing things by consensus, so I think we would do that decision by consensus as well. And so I guess I would have to be convinced the reason of why. If the commission isn't being successful, I can understand, but I would be looking to why we would do this. And it's just not because, or because that's the way some others do that. I would like to understand a reason.
Do you want to respond to that, Commissioner Dunleavy?
Okay, sign back on. Yeah, I think just so we don't become probably the 16 most influential people on recycling policy, I think rotating and getting new ideas over time is going to be beneficial to the state. So I just think having new ideas, new people is going to generate a greater benefit in the long run.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other comments. I guess I'll just wrap up by saying my preference is that we not take up, the CalRecycle has the authority to appoint. We have statutory requirement to get a new report in next July, not even this December. That's a self-imposed goal to try and hit any kind of advice going into a legislative session, which I still think is important. And I think we found it very beneficial last year to do that. The term limits and and support through financing. I think that the legislation does not authorize any support, and that would have to be a recommendation that we get funding, which I think anything with funding from the state is always a fight. But it certainly could be something that we recommend if the group thought that that was important. But there is, of course, the reason it's voluntary is because there are people, I'm sure, that thought that this was best being voluntary for some reason. So those discussions, though, to me, are to be done after we get our December report done. Because the most important task we've been given is giving good advice on policy that can change things for the better in California. And I'm already getting calls from legislators. I'm sure several people are on this commission, if not all of us, about what to run next year. So if we don't give them clear advice, they don't know where our collective mind is. And my preference would be that this could be an agenda item in January if the commission wanted to hear it at that time or wanted to wait. But I think a lot of this is just up to us as a group. So is there any other comment, or is everybody, let me put it this way. Are you okay with us putting this off to an agenda item in January and giving it maybe 20 minutes of a 3-hour meeting? Or is that okay? I see Commissioner Ward is okay with that. Is there anybody who is not okay with that? Or do they have any other thoughts on that?
Chair Sandberg, I just don't want this to turn into a distraction on the work that needs to get done. We need to get done with a December report. I'm glad you're saying that we need to make things more effective and efficient and truly find out what we can do without putting additional things on folks, towards the December report, and then, really re-engage and re-energize next year. I would hate for this to turn into the main thing that we discuss versus providing good policy. And once again, I want to say that this commission has been putting some very good policy, and it's shown by the number of legislative pieces that went through, and they're going to be meaningful. And so, once again, I don't want this to turn into a distraction. 20 minutes, okay. I just don't want this to turn into a 2-hour discussion about this, because I think that would be wasteful.
Very good. Thank you. And then Commissioner Ward.
Just among the things that Commissioner Don Levy mentioned, it seems that the thing that's in greatest control of the commission is the duration of the chair appointment. And I'm fine on discussing that sometime before. I think it's appropriate as the 2-year cycle ends, we start again. Maybe we select another chair, but I think that could be part of the discussion, and I don't see any urgency to address it prior to the completion of the report next July.
I agree. I think the chairship is very important, and it's I serve at your will. So if anybody decides it's time for me to step down, just let me know. And we can have that discussion and put it on the agenda. And maybe that can be part of the agenda item for the 20-minute discussion in January, if the commission wishes to discuss the chairship. Again, every time we talk about operations and how we operate, we're taking away time from policy. So it's just, so I'll limit it based on what Commissioner Ursugura said. If everybody's okay, we'll just give it 20 minutes in the first January meeting to go over all these issues. Unless I hear otherwise, I'm assuming we have consensus. I see no other comments. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, if we're finished with that discussion, I did want to bring up a topic that I've heard a couple times, and that's our ability as commissioners to reach out to CalRecycle staff directly and have discussions rather than have to put it on the agenda. And maybe Zoe is can clarify that. I read Bagley Keene, and it seems appropriate. And would be very helpful in trying to complete some of the work that we're undertaking. So.
Okay. Is that something you're asking CalRecycle?
If we're not ready today to discuss it, I'd like to have a discussion as soon as possible if it requires an agenda.
John, is that specific to the 2-person committee?
Well, I mean, the two-person committees, I guess we can accept the direction we've been given. Bagley-Keene basically says we shouldn't hold serial meetings
Right.
involving a majority of the commissioners, but can we discuss topics with Cal Recycle staff as part of our commission work?
You'd want to look at conversations with us as conversations with any entity. So that would be my recommendation. Just consider us like any stakeholder that you would reach out to, and proceed with that in mind.
Which means
So
that we're supposed to be doing 2 people at a time.
What's that?
I mean, if the two-person working groups want to discuss a topic with Cal Recycle staff, is the procedure then that only one of us can talk to Cal Recycle staff and then not discuss what we learned with the other person?
I'll have to look into that, but you know, the recommendation as far as abiding by Bagley-Keene and ensuring that if it's a 2-person committee, that you're, you know, not holding serial meetings, but we can check on the individual and how that would translate back to communicating.
Yeah, I mean, it would certainly make our work a lot easier to accomplish if the two-person committees could hold some discussions with knowledgeable staff.
So actually, that's a new data request. So
Yeah,
Jessica,
otherwise it has to be a meeting topic, right? We have to bring our recycle staff for each, if we want to have a discussion, otherwise we get a memo and then respond to the memo and just.
If I could chime in with my approach on this, I think when you trying to avoid a serial meeting with 3 people, to me, the main thing is what you don't want to be is developing policy with a conversation of 3 people. So to me, each individual commissioner can directly talk to anybody else and bring that discussion back to the 2-person committee. And then policy development can happen with those 2 persons. But what you don't want to have is a 3rd person involved in that policy development discussion. So to me, the way to move forward on all of these and incorporate input from others, have each individual talk specifically to one entity, bring that conversation back to the 2-person, and then that's policy development.
okay, so we do have an official data request for Cal Recycle to give us some feedback on this around the clarity of an individual commissioner asking questions directly of Cal Recycle outside of a 2-person group. Correct, Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that's a new data request that we need to make sure we get accurately down and get a response if we can. All right, and I just want to say this discussion around the chair, we haven't really had that since I was elected. So I just want to put it out there. If anybody has any comments, questions, suggestions, I do get them from commissioners, you know, here and there. So feel free to email me or call me. But if you feel it's time for me to move on, let me know that too, and we can certainly add it to the agenda. I have no problem with that. That's democracy. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move it on to agenda item number 6, and thank you for basically keeping us on time. Oh, one last thing. Sorry, we have to go back to 5 for just 1 second. I did have on the agenda that we would discuss future meetings and how long they would be and when they would be. My suggestion, I've heard others say it, is that we go back to 3-hour meetings, especially going into the holidays, and possibly not have the first meeting of January so everybody can really relax over the holidays. Again, we really didn't have a break. We were all doing a lot of stuff during our so-called break from commission meetings. And I think everybody's really tired, and I can tell from just the lack of, you know, information coming and people reading things. And so I just want to make sure that we're given the adequate time to rest, to be refreshed for next year. So is that okay with everybody if we move the last 4 meetings of this year to 3-hour meetings from 9 to 12? Is there anybody who is not okay with that? I see 1 thumbs up. And Commissioner Ward, did you want to say something? No. So is there anybody who's not okay with moving to 3-hour meetings and really sticking tightly to the agenda to get through? Okay, then we'll move the last meetings of, well, 3 meetings of this year from 8 to 12:30 and 9 to 12 to make them all 9 to 12. And we'll update the website to say that. And then I would suggest that we definitely not meet January 5th, or else we're all working all through the holidays. And that we pick back up on January 19th and continue with that schedule of 3-hour meetings twice a month. Is there anybody opposed to that or would wish to speak to that? Commissioner Kalbakoff.
No, I don't. That's fine. The meeting dates are fine. Just a comment. Going into this new structure of the subcommittees within the committee meeting is could be a cause for some of this. I think that when you break out into subcommittees, you have a more robust conversation about a policy, and you can have additional people, whether it's calorie cycle, come present, and it's not in a group setting where it's 16, different kind of opinions, or not. Maybe not opinions is a great word for it, but I'm probably better serving under a composting and curbside recycling rather than a markets development and or a labeling. And so that's my specialty. And I think there's plenty of people on this commission who have specialties in certain items and fields. And I think maybe having a conversation in January about going back to that subcommittee kind of format may be beneficial. So that's my comment.
It's a good point. And I guess we were hoping that the 2-person committees could move a lot faster and do a lot more and still bring the policies forward. But the presentations, that means we all have to do them together. And that may be slowing us down, but I also know that there's a lot of limited resources and time for even commissioners to go to all these multiple meetings. And I know that's an issue for me. I have maxed out what I can do on this commission as far as time, and I have to actually hourly budget myself because otherwise it's cutting into my work too much during the day. So it's certainly something we can discuss in January on the 19th in that 20-minute period about those items. I think this should be one of them, discussing bringing up how, if you want to do committees, if so, which ones. And then those people who wish to spend that extra time can do it. But I know some of us are not going to be able to do that anymore. And I've heard that from others as well. Thank you very much. I think this is a very healthy discussion and I really appreciate it. So we are at 9:53, just a few minutes behind, not too bad, going into agenda item 6, which is our big one. This is where we get report outs from commissioners from the 2-person committees. There's really, if there's nothing to say and there's nothing to ask of the commissioners to get feedback on, please, and I didn't get really almost anything in writing from any of the commissioners, which again tells me everybody's pretty tired, which is fine. We'll go ahead and just skip right over that committee. I'd really like to focus on the policies that people did spend time on and wanted to get heard at the last meeting and didn't get heard, so that we can all really dig deep into those and thank the commissioners who did the hard work to work on those policies. So we're going to start with policy on contamination labeling and outreach. It was the 2-person committee of Dell and Valle. And again, I'm sorry we didn't get to this at the last meeting. So Commissioner Dell.
Great. Can I share my screen?
Definitely, if Cal Recycle can let Commissioner Dell share her screen.
Is anyone seeing my screen?
I see it, but it's
okay.
Yeah, if you could expand it to the
yeah, right to this. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, and now I've got to minimize the. All right, so I can't see anybody's face or anything now. So So time is money. So I am going to go through this quick. To Commissioner Sky's comment, we've all talked about a lot of this for the past year. So I'm just going to hit this first and fast. So this, I'd like to propose, I'd like to take the time of the commission to talk about two things today. One is a policy proposal, which I have in PowerPoint form, but it's in order to share it in a visual form and then get feedback from the commission, whether there's support to turn this into a policy document. And then I will type out the proper text form of how we would do a policy document. And then the second thing to talk about is whether or not we would like to send letters to either product companies or the state attorney general. So I'll hit this fast. So what I'd like to propose today is actually working title, something called Recycled Content Traceability Proposal. And where this has come about for two reasons. One, we have recycled content laws in California on plastic bags and now on PET bottles, right? And other, I think, other beverage bottles. And this has come about for two reasons. One, after SB 343 was passed, a false narrative started getting promoted in the media and in other outlets by the plastics industry and organizations they work with that, oh, we really need to get all these consumer plastic bags back because we need them in order to make recycled content for plastic bags. And what I think is unclear is that people don't understand that actually the so-called post-consumer content that is in plastic bags, and I've got a stack here I actually brought with me, is actually coming from pallet wrap film. Actually, the public doesn't understand. I did not understand until I joined this commission that the so-called post-consumer plastic in the recycled content is actually pallet wrap that consumers never touch. And I think that this needs to be made clear. What we need is traceability of actually where the plastic comes from, and then the fact that it is recycled in plastic bags. And as I thought more about this, and I actually just saw an article, which I'll share, about how there's now fraudulent recycled plastic in textiles being found, we really need to have some verification or certification that the recycled content that that product companies are claiming they're using actually is recycled content and where it comes from. So I actually pulled up the law around California plastic bag recycled content, and this may have been partly of what Commissioner Davis was referring to, but I'm not sure. And what I just wanted to show that there is actually no proof required of where the recycled plastic comes from. And if I've got any of this incorrect, Commissioner Lapis, because you're an expert, please say something. And I can't see if you're putting in a symbol or not. Just pipe in, please. But it's based on what I've read here. Plastic bag manufacturers don't have to certify that there's recycled content. And just so everybody knows, that recycled content includes plastic films that consumers have never touched. And the reality is, based on all the research that I've done and talked with recyclers, plastic bag manufacturers, and so on, is that these plastic films on the left, this is grade A and grade B films, are actually what they want in order to make recycled content for plastic bags. This mixed mess that ends up in the few recycle bins that are still in California isn't even grade C. It's a mixed mess that goes to trash. It's not actually made into plastic bags. I just wanted to share this article that's just come out in the UK, actually, where they've unearthed that there's false claims of recycled plastic have now been found in polyester and in garments from high street fashion brands, which means like their big label, big Marks and Spencer type. I'm not saying Marks and Spencer, but big type of stores like that, that they're selling products that supposedly have recycled content, and when they go to test them, they actually don't. So just to hit this real quickly, and I can show more data, the policy proposal is to create some sort of recycled content traceability law. And I think we need it for plastic bags and also for PET bottles. We need some sort of certification that the plastic is actually recycled and where it comes from. For plastic bags, we need to know, does it come from pallet wrap or does it come from bags that are actually touched by consumers? And I believe we need to know, does this material actually source from California? The point of recycled content laws, I believe, is actually to stop waste from California's waste from going into California's landfills. Now, we are a state, so we can't write a law that says only California material can be used, but I think it's something that we need to know. I just want to make it clear, though, in this policy proposal, I'm not suggesting that pallet wrap shouldn't be used, because actually it's a good source of material to use as recycled content, and it serves a purpose. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't allow it. I'm just saying that we need to trace what's actually being used. And I'm definitely not suggesting that we make companies or retailers put more take back bins out, because there's no market demand for that mixed plastic that ends up being tossed in the few plastic contaminated bins that exist. I just wanted to remind, we've seen this before, plastic, trash bags are a huge contamination. And actually, this is where I'll get to some new material around here. This is what one of California's good plastic film processors, this company that's trying really hard in Southern California to recycle good grade A or grade B films. And look what they don't want. They don't want trash. They don't want water. They don't want bottles and cups, all the things that end up in curbside in take back bins. They want grade A or grade B, which is nice, clean pallet wrap film. Same for Trex. If you look at their standards and so on, no liquids, no paper, no bottles. And yeah, that's what always ends up in the take back bins. And of course, there's very few take back bins that exist, but just to skip to all the reasons why. Oh, I'll go ahead and show this. This is something that most people probably don't know. Actually, More Recycling, along with this group, which is called recyclemoreplastics.org, actually stated in 2019 that several hundred millions of pounds of plastic bags were collected in North America in 2018 and were landfilled or incinerated due to lack of end markets. And so this just shows you that this collection of plastic bags doesn't have an end market, and that's not what's actually going into plastic films. So just to summarize the overview of this policy, which I initially aimed at to be plastic bags, we could also decide to just do it for plastic bags and bottles at the same time, with a view to everything that we might have a recycled content mandate in. Thermoforms in the future, anything. I think that at this point, we've seen enough, fraudulent sort of things of, what was it we saw? The fake printer cartridges coming in, to the country, that if we're going to put in a law that requires something, that we should have some sort of law that also requires verification that that recycled content is true. And with that, I will open it up to comments and questions.
Okay, and I just want to say I hadn't seen this PowerPoint. Can we get it so we can upload it and everybody can reflect?
Yeah, I've sent it before, but I just uploaded that one article today. So I'll send it all out in PDF afterwards. Sure.
Thank you. I think it's Commissioner Schneider and then Commissioner Davis.
Hi, I think you clarified it, Commissioner Dell, but the pallet wrap is from a commercial stream, and whether it touches the consumer's hand or not, it's still a valid post-consumer material. I come from the commercial recycling world. It's just different on that. So I just would like us to be careful. We still need to be finding markets that come from the commercial stream. If it's cleaner and it goes to a particular end use, that's a market development issue. But you clarified it at the end.
Yeah, I am absolutely not saying that we shouldn't use pallet wrap film at all, because you are correct, but it isn't post-consumer, it's post.
No, it is. It is. Actually, having taught this, having worked in this, when a material goes to a business and is utilized by a business and then enters the recycling stream, it is post-consumer. I guess I hear your point. You're saying consumer really means the consumer hands.
Yeah.
But the consumer, rather than a resident, is a business consumer. So we just need to be very careful on that term. It is post-consumer. It's not pre-consumer. It's not industrial material, but it is post-consumer. It's just a different stream.
Sure, we can agree to disagree on that, and I'm not saying we shouldn't use it, but what the policy proposal is is that we need to track whether or not actually the plastic that is being called recycled is actually recycled. We've also heard rumors of PET coming in from Mexico that says it's recycled PET that may not actually be recycled PET for bottles, you know.
And I agree with you, but in a typical city, 70% of the waste stream is commercial, not residential. So we do not want to be perceived as not recognizing the need to find markets for materials that come from the commercial base.
Absolutely, and I'm not suggesting that we.
Yeah, but you just said it's not post-consumer. It is post-consumer, just a different stream.
Sure, we can agree to disagree, and there it is on the policy that this does not promote doing anything different with plastic bale wrap, pallet wrap right now. And so, yeah,
and
so
I'm sorry, we're not gonna, you know, the agree to disagree, I get it, but I taught this and I come from Hewlett Packard and from the City of San Jose commercial recycling program. And I think anybody out there working in commercial recycling.
Okay.
We'll take
we've
a little
heard the comments. I think we need to move on. We've got 4 other people that have a comment on this, and I think point taken. Commissioner Davis and then Lapis.
Yeah, Commissioner Dell, the section that I've mentioned earlier, the PRC 42281.5, actually requires certification by a third-party certification entity about the post-consumer content. So I think we really need to look at that section, and if we're gonna, if there are things to change in that section, that would be the way to approach it. But there is already a requirement. When I asked earlier if we could get a response from CalRecycle, because that language does say a producer shall provide proof of certification to the department, and the department being CalRecycle.
In which section? In which, because I looked up
42281.5.
Yeah, that's I agree. So let's get that from CalRecycle, because that's exactly what I looked up, and I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's in there, and I think it duplicates a lot of what you're saying needs to be done on clarifying the content. There's also, I think in 42281, I'm sorry, I'm flipping around here. In the definitions, proceeding is, there's a definition of post-consumer. So you should look at that. It's in line.
I've got it. It's on the screen. Yeah, so I've got it on the screen right here, and this is straight it out. Post-consumer means material that has completed its intended use and in life, right? And so that includes what most people, the average person, would think of as post-commercial. And then
it's the second sentence in that section that it does not include material from original manufacturing and fabrication. I think that was Commissioner Schneider's point, that if it's entered into the marketplace and then it's used up, that's post-consumer. If it comes off the floor of a factory, that's not post-consumer. So, but nonetheless, I think the 81.5 really gets to the certification.
So, okay, so we need that clarified from CalRecycle, because I cut and pasted this out right here in 42881, and this is literally required. This is a statement from the CalRecycle website. Is separate certification requirement for this needed? And they say no, the bag ban statute does not contain a separate requirement for post-consumer retail. So this is great. You've made the data request, and let's get this from CalRecycle, because there is no data available on this whatsoever that I can find.
Well, it actually, if you read the full paragraph at the end, it references the recycled content requirements of 42281.5.
Right. And when you go to that link, if you have it there, you can read it, but then there's nothing about what they have to. Okay, go ahead, read it.
Well, I could show it, but I can read it. If it's honor after July 1, 2015, a producer of reusable grocery bags made from plastic film shall not sell or distribute a reusable grocery bag in the state unless the producer is certified by a third-party certification entity pursuant to section 42282. Producers shall provide proof of certification to the department demonstrating that the reusable bag produced by the producer comply with the provisions of this article. Proof of certification shall include names, locations, and contact information of all sources of post-consumer recycled material and suppliers of post-consumer recycled material, quantity and dates of post-consumer recycled material purchases by the reusable grocery bag producer, how the post-consumer recycled material is obtained, and information demonstrating that the post-consumer recycled material is cleaned using appropriate washing equipment.
Okay, I'll look at that in more detail, but at no point has any of that come out to the extent that we can show, you know. And does it actually say whether, you know, they have to do testing to show? This is what I'm getting to.
It says a third-party certification entity.
And what that,
there's another long section about what the third-party certification requires.
okay, I'm willing to take this one on offline and look at what the existing law says and see if it's been followed. And then also if we can get public reports to the effect that proves that where it's actually coming from and everything that's been required in that law, if it's actually being enforced. If it's a law and it's being enforced and it actually is, that's great. But I do think that we need a traceability for the public to understand where the recycled content is coming from.
Yeah, so maybe I would amend my earlier request about the 422A1.5 and include these 42282, and since that's the testing protocol, if that's okay.
So you're amending your data request?
Yeah, add the other section. So, you know, there's a full section just on reusable bags. So I think, but
so I just want to make sure that the staff caught this in the notes.
So this is Laura Moreno, and I just want to clarify the request. So the request previously was about enforcement authority related to mislabeled products as recyclable or compostable, correct? And then now this is an additional request related to certification of post-consumer recycled content?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Actually, Laura, the 422A1.5 is the reusable bag certification, but I would add 42282, which is the process of the third-party certification, and so add that to the request.
And the request would be to explain how this is done, to ask if any results are public, and so on, so that we can have transparency on it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, it's not clear whether this information is public.
Okay, so I'm just gonna reiterate for all the commissioners, we're assuming everybody who's quiet is agreeing with this data request. If you oppose it or want to change it, please speak up. So we'll assume this is it until we get through all the comments. So the next commissioner is Lapis and then Toyota.
Yeah, I was originally going to make the same comment about the distinction with post-consumer and that, you know, the store is the consumer, but that comment's already been made. That aside, I do really like the idea of us identifying best practices for verifying recycled content. I know there has been a lot of fraud with imported bags, and you know, as we develop other recycled content mandates, whether it's bags or bottles or thermoforms or whatever else, it would be good to have best practices for verification. I'm not an expert in this, but it definitely seems like an area that warrants some recommendations.
Okay, so Commissioner Toyota.
I just want to say that I do support the idea of the traceability. I think that a lot of what we want to get done can be driven by the consumers, but there's just no really good way for them to get information. And I think that traceability and all kinds of concepts of recycling is a good idea and a good way to go.
Okay, and I think Commissioner John Levy, you do have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I think Commissioner Schneider was on point. Once it's been sold by a manufacturer and the product comes into circulation, even if it is through an industrial warehouse or a commercial dealer, that material does become post-consumer. And then as far as verification of post-consumer content, I think that is very important. We should have that as a priority, but I would expand it not to just plastic, but also glass, because right now we're hearing about supply chain issues and a potential wine bottle glass shortage, because a lot of wine bottles are being imported into California with post-consumer content, is what they're saying they have in them. But there's a lot of California bottle makers that have the same ability to make those same bottles, but we are importing a lot of glass bottles into California from other countries. And if they're claiming that their bottles are post-consumer content and there's no verification on that, we should be looking at all materials for post-consumer content with third-party verification.
Okay. So I would say you've gotten a lot of feedback on this.
And I wanted that. Yeah, I mean, this is good. This is because it started with the idea of there's this false narrative that plastic films and bags that go out and are put in take back bins are actually what's being made. And so I'm all about the facts and the truth and getting to the root of what's really happening. And there is something already sort of done. We'll see if it's being enforced in the bag mandate. But it's a bigger issue. So I raise my hand, and if anybody would like to volunteer to work on this, to put a framework around recycled content verification, we can do it for all materials. Then with the view to, okay, it could be clamshells, it could be cans, what have you, right? That we should have some sort of law that will hopefully be enforced, that certifies that it is. So the good guys are doing the right thing, win, and we don't have frauds.
I mean, to me, this is just like truth in labeling. It's if we require recycled content, but we aren't verifying, it's always trust but verify. And the studies that are coming out in the press about the lack of verification on all of this is quite shocking. So I would totally support a policy around this and making sure there's a enforcement that's working. Commissioner Ward.
I just thought I'd mention here that while I admire the effort to try to certify post-consumer content, I think we run the risk of trying to chase content issues without addressing the fundamental resource extraction subsidies and the way that we support the oversupply of material into the overall economy. And if we don't address those oversupply issues, then we're chasing what happened to this little bit of plastic and was that used in the right way, and it's expense without necessarily changing the result. And so I really emphasize that we need to deal with the front end, because the oversupply of material is the main driver of these inappropriate claims about whether they're post-consumer or not. Essentially, the other material's cheap, they fold it in, they hope not to get caught. That's my impression.
Well, and I just want to say, both you and I, Commissioner Ward, were tasked after the last meeting to address and respond to the comment from the city of Palo Alto regarding the creation of an enhanced database and new recyclables tracking system within 1 to 2 years that requires businesses handling recyclables to begin entering data shortly afterwards and exploring third-party certification process. So this whole discussion is kind of getting to what the city of Palo Alto asked of us. And I guess one of the things I would like to highlight is blockchain is coming. And I believe that there's going to be systems very quickly, instead of the old archaic, thou shalt write stuff down and put it in a database and all of that. It's just going to automatically be running through the system and tracking through blockchain and other methods. And that'll make it a lot easier on the businesses than having to track more stuff, which I can see would be argued by the business community as more burden in a state that's already seen as not friendly to business. So we just have to be aware of all those things. And then Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, actually, Chair Sanborn, you and I were tasked to work on the Palo Alto
Oh, was you? Well, then
yeah.
that's the beginning, and I should go back.
Yeah, that was what was behind my earlier trying to clarify whether we can talk directly to Cal Recycle staff, because anyway, we can follow up on that one. I suggest maybe that we let's see what we get from Cal Recycle about the existing statute. It's pretty comprehensive, including a testing protocol. But if it's not working, then I think it behooves us to make a recommendation. It also requires a fee paid to Cal Recycle to support their verification of the third-party certification. So I think it probably is something we can build upon, but I'd like to hear what Cal Recycle has to say about the efficacy of it, and in fact whether they're following through with it, and whether the data is available to us. But I also wanted to follow up with Commissioner Donlevy on glass. The Market Development Committee did discuss the current statute, which only applies to glass bottles manufactured or glass containers manufactured in California. And we understand there's a lot of import and no verification. So we actually have a draft policy recommendation that we did not bring forward because of some issues with the Glass Packaging Institute's work. But I'm ready to bring that forward, and if Commissioner Donlevy would like to work with me on it, I would invite him to form a new two-person committee when it's appropriate to do that.
Well, you can form it now. Do you want to form another two-person committee then? I saw a thumbs up from Commissioner Donlevy.
I've already got it. I'm ready to bring it forward. But if Jeff wants, okay.
Okay, so we have a new two-person committee, and what are we going to call? What is this focused on? Just make sure.
Glass packaging. Glass packaging.
Glass packaging. Great. Yeah. All of a sudden, that seems to be becoming a big issue again. Great. All right. So that'll be in the notes that you two are a new two-person committee and come forward with a proposal. That would be great. Is there any more feedback for Commissioner Dell so she can actually put this policy into the format and we can have it heard again at the next meeting for this?
Well, I think I should wait to Commissioner Davis's point. Let's get the report out from Cal Recycle about how the certification and verification is working. Is it working? Is it being enforced on plastic bags? And see how that's going. And then we can just put a pin in this for now with the idea that some sort of verification of recycled content claims is worthwhile and is needed on whatever element it is, whatever type of packaging that we're talking about. So we'll just wait for the presentation from Cal Recycle.
Okay. Or whatever, they give us some feedback in writing, we'll post it, yeah.
Okay. And then so let's take it, but this is a good discussion because it's really this whole idea of verification of recycled content, which is the next frontier, right? And it's too bad that sometimes that, there just aren't, where there's money to be made, that, then fraud happens. And so we want to stop that. So then the second point that I wanted to bring up is something we've talked about before. And again, to the previous commissioner's comments that we take time talking about the same thing over and over again. We've raised the idea of, because there are incorrect labels on plastic bags, and yes, I brought them from California with me. to show, yes, there are clearly labels on bags handed out in California that literally have a recycle symbol, that say recycle. There's like a bag with a recycle symbol being handed out today. In my opinion, this is not compliant with existing law, never mind SB 343, existing law by the FTC or California law. And it's confusing consumers and contaminating curbside bins and harming workers. And so we had all voted and agreed that we would write letters. I would write letters, everyone would approve them to product companies. But then a question came up and we asked Cal Recycle, are we allowed to write those letters? And we didn't really get an answer today. And I totally appreciate it. As I said before, if some commissioners aren't comfortable with doing this, then let's not do it. And in fact, as we put this on pause, I thought, well, you know what, maybe there's a more strategic way to go about this, assuming we all want to do something, because right now those labels are happening and literally no one's doing anything about it, which I think is not correct. Someone should be doing something about it, and we shouldn't rely on NGOs to file lawsuits. And one alternative that occurred to me would be that we make a long list of these with photos and so on, and send one letter to the Attorney General from the commission saying, can you please investigate this? We are the commission, independent commission. We've highlighted these as labels of concern. We would like you, the state's authority, to please investigate this and take action if needed. And that way, there shouldn't be a legal exposure to us as individuals, because we are asking the enforcement agency to review and investigate it and take action. And then it would just be one letter that we send out, which would be simpler to do anyway. So at that point, I'm actually bringing this up as an alternative idea because of the roadblock we've seemed to have hit on writing letters to product companies. And I'm open to, or we could do, or C, we could do nothing, or D, if anyone else has any ideas that how we can try to address these labels.
I see Commissioner Valle's hand is up. He has joined us. Did you want to say something and couldn't put anything in the chat? Because there's other people too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but for some reason the chat device is not working for me.
No problem. Just go ahead and we'll back up. Yep.
I really want to do something about this. I don't want to leave it undone. I would agree with Commissioner Dell that the best thing we can do perhaps is a letter from the chair and vice chair and be very specific about something that we want remedied to the Attorney General, followed up with a phone call. He's a good friend. I would move that we do something. Exactly what we have to be really clear about, because we want to take one shot at this and make sure it's a clean one and there's a relatively easy outcome. So in other words, let's be very precise about what we write in this letter and what we're asking. So I would ask that if it's agreeable to the commissioners, that we come up with a draft, pass it around, and get some feedback from all, if everybody is in agreement that we need to do something on this front. Because there really is no enforcement. That's being made really clear. Cal Recycle has told us numerous times they are not an enforcement body. They are working at the will of the legislature and the legislation that they have in front of them. So they do not have any enforcement capacity or ability. So therefore, I think the idea of going to the Attorney General makes sense. District attorneys do it all the time on a local basis when people do false advertising or in some way misrepresent themselves to consumers. I've seen many lawsuits in Alameda County where the district attorney has successfully challenged a manufacturer or somebody claiming to do something, and that's called fraud. And they've won those cases. This is a little bit different level. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, and I'm just going to read real quickly out loud the PRC establishing the commission and what our authority is, because it said the commission shall do both of the following. And the first is to issue policy recommendations to achieve market development goals and the state policy goals for the recycling rates, and then also to identify products that are recyclable or compostable and regularly collected in curbside programs. So this is getting a little bit off, and I guess I totally agree we should do something. I'm just wondering if the right thing might be to advise Cal Recycle and the legislature and Cal EPA that there's no enforcement right now on labeling. It's a chronic problem across the board, and we need to develop a system in the state that is clear, transparent, and working on enforcement of labeling of all kinds. And we can even list it's, you know, whether it's recyclable or compostable or recycled content. But the problem fundamentally starts when the public is getting misled on what they're buying, and they're driving the wrong market, and it's not their fault because they're being misled. So I don't know, I'll just throw that out there and let the couple of commissioners respond. I think, I don't know if we back up to Commissioner Ward or Davis on this. Ward or Davis, and then Sky.
So I interpreted Vice Chair Valle's comments as a motion to send a letter to the Attorney General as recommended by Commissioner Dell, but it sounds like our chair had maybe a different idea. So I'll kind of adjust and make a substitute motion. I think we should send a letter to the Attorney General, but I would frame it as a data request rather than a recommendation, and just say, we're aware of these situations where products seem to be mislabeled. This seems to be a violation of this code. How does your office treat these cases, and would it be helpful to your office if our commission identified additional examples? And then I also agree, Chair Sanborn, with your recommendations that the policy recommendation should be to Cal Recycle to say, this is definitely an issue, there is an enforcement, and we recommend you, and it could be also part of our report to the legislature that the legislature take action. So that'll be my substitute motion.
And I would second that. But we'll move on while we put a pause on that to listen to Commissioner Toyota to see what input she has.
I really agree with that as well. I think this belongs with Cal Recycle, and I think that the idea of a policy to give them basically the authority and whatever else they need to enforce it belongs there. And there's no local jurisdiction that's trying and having issues implementing 1383 that doesn't feel the enforcement authority of Cal Recycle right now. They are very good at it. They just need to be given the authority to do it on this aspect.
Yeah, and then this is where the commission can basically say to the legislature who created us, you asked for our advice. Our advice is you've got to give the authority to Cal Recycle to do their job, because this is a gigantic hole that the trucks are running through, and it's undermining the entire system, especially when it comes to contamination and driving markets, which are two of our biggest tasks. So is that good feedback then? Should we go ahead? I guess we'll take a vote on that motion.
Can I just clarify? I feel like we have two suggestions, which are both really good. Well, all the suggestions are good, but one is to write a letter to the state attorney general to engage with them, because they are the enforcer ultimately. I think Cal Recycle, it's interesting that they're really good at enforcing on cities. SB 1383. That's fascinating, but they haven't done this, on companies. So the state attorney general is the sheriff in town, and this idea of an engagement letter to try to have this commission engage with them and a discussion with them, I think is really interesting. That's one idea, and we can do that. But in a parallel path, we could also and learn from them basically. And then the parallel path would be to propose a policy recommendation that gives greater authority somehow to Cal Recycle to to enforce or work with the state attorney general to ultimately enforce label laws. Can we do both things?
My
Yeah, that
comfort
was
level
the
as
intention
chair
of mine.
signing this is that I don't think I would be much more comfortable sending a letter on behalf of the commission to Cal Recycle and Cal EPA and CCing the legislators who formed our commission and also the AG. That way, the legislature knows, but they're not the direct target of the letter. And the AG and the legislature knows, but we're advising Cal EPA that this is something we think needs to be done. That would be where I think my comfort is, because if we start sending as a commission letters to other state agencies that we were not tasked with advising, and even if it's data requests, we're starting to get off into areas. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of stuff, a lot of politics. So it's just, I want to be really careful that we stay within the lines of what we've been tasked to do, because it can get legally dangerous and we don't have legal advice, quite frankly. So
I'll defer to whatever the group wants to do.
Okay, we'll let Commissioner
I'll
Ward
take that
know.
as a friendly amendment, then Chair Sanborn can share my original.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think this all sounds really good. But I really think that this is something that we could potentially get together for the January report, similar to the letter on AB 2020. It seems like the letters sent is a good policy avenue.
Okay, well, let's, did you, Commissioner Sky, want to amend your motion?
I saw your comments as a friendly amendment to just send one letter directed to Cal Recycle and the legislature, and it'll essentially do the two things simultaneously. It'll share information as a CC with the Attorney General, but really highlight the fact that we'd like to see the enforcement authority be provided to Cal Recycle.
And my suggestion was also to CC the Attorney General, just so they can see the letter, but not necessarily, it's not directed at them. I'm comfortable.
I'm okay with that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I'd like to defer to someone else to write that letter. That's not my preferred approach, but I'm consensus driven, so I'm gonna agree with it. I think the state attorney general should own this. But so if that's the approach the commission wants to take, totally fine, but I would defer to somebody else to be the leader in writing that letter.
Okay, let's hear from a couple of other commissioners and see if they have other suggestions before we vote on this. Commissioner Ward, then Davis, and then Osagura.
I had my bit. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, just for me to maybe help me understand, we can issue recommendations and share the recommendations with the legislature or any state or federal agency. So I just wanted to clarify that we could share. I think the question was whether an information request to the Attorney General is appropriate, but if we have a recommendation, we could certainly share it with the Attorney General's office, and that recommendation might be to enforce the statutes that are already on the books, as well as clarifying, what we might do better. So I just wanted to, in my mind, I think we could somehow structure a recommendation that we could share with the Attorney General's office, any state or federal agency.
So you're okay with the CC to the Attorney General if we're making recommendations to Cal Recycle and the legislature on making sure that the law on the books is being enforced and that it's being transparent somehow to all of us what is happening, because it's so fundamental to contamination and truth in labeling?
Yeah, if there's a way to enforce already under statute, the Attorney General would seem to be the place to do that. It may not be specific Cal Recycle enforcement. There are other labeling laws out there, and truth in advertising. So.
Okay. And then Commissioner Osagura?
I won't be long. I just thought, Commissioner Sky, friendly changes that were done by yourself, Chair, I think are appropriate. I think it keeps us in line to where we should be sending this letter. The CC to the AGs, I think is fine, but I think it delivers the message that we want to deliver. It keeps with our directives.
Right. Okay. Well, we can go ahead and take a vote on this, but we do have to have somebody to write it. And I can say I'm happy to edit something, but my plate is full. So if there's somebody else out there, if Commissioner Dell does not want to write it, Commissioner Vice Chair Valle, I guess your hand up is, so hopefully you're open to helping write it.
I would be glad to take a shot at drafting it and working with one other commissioner if I can get one more volunteer.
I'm happy to edit. I just can't start it and do all the hard, heavy lift.
Okay. I will definitely, I would like to take the shot and then work with Commissioner Dell to get concrete examples so that the letter is very clear and demonstrates exactly what we're trying to achieve.
And then that's great. And then you can both bring it back to the commission for a full review at the next meeting, and then everybody can see it publicly. And once I get everybody's okay, I can sign it. Or do you want to delegate just to Commissioner Dell and Valle to write it, and then I would just sign it with the Commissioner Valle on behalf of the commission?
Everybody should review it, I should think.
Yeah. Okay, let's make sure it's on the next agenda. So that's another agenda item for the staff to make sure we get that for the next meeting, is the letter. Okay, so with that, we can go ahead and vote on the amended motion. Commissioner Davis, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, if we're going to get examples, I suggest that you document, where this item came from, when it was collected. I mean, it's important that we're giving examples of current, particularly if we're going to ask for consideration of enforcement, that they know it's coming here. This isn't something from 10 years ago. This is something from last week. So, and where it came from, when.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Dell has plenty of very recent examples. She's very good at that. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and vote on Commissioner Sky's motion with friendly amendments, and I seconded it to write a letter to Cal Recycle, CCing the AG and the legislature, or at least Senator Eggman, who authorized this commission, about that we ask that they enforce the existing law, and that the Cal Recycle make sure they can, one, know what's happening with the enforcement of this law, and two, if they, if it's not getting enforced, that something change in law or policy, that they get authority. Somebody gets the authority and is actually going to enforce these laws on the books. Basically, that's it, right? Okay. So I'll make sure. Is everybody okay with that? Thumbs up. Is there anybody, great, is not okay with that? So we have consensus. I don't see any or hear any, and some people don't have their screens on. So I'm assuming you're all okay and we have a unanimous recommendation. Now, unanimous is who is here. We're missing a couple of people. I think we're missing Commissioner Ferrante still. So, okay, then that's very good work. Thank you so much, Commissioner Dell, for all the hard work, and Commissioner Valle. That's excellent. And I'm really excited that you've identified this, and we're gonna get this documented and addressed. All right, so we will now move on. We're at 10:43. And we've got lots of other things to discuss and policies. So we're going to have to move to get through these. So I'm going to just ask the different two-person committees to just say pass if you do not need to update us on anything or ask for any input from the commission. So we'll start with waste reduction and recycling, which is waste prevention, Schneider and Ward.
I think we're focused on recommendations probably for the July report rather than the January report. So I don't have any further updates on the waste prevention unless Commissioner Snyder.
Okay.
I would only add that my city has passed a moratorium on the installation of artificial turf, still diving into the subject. The reason a city in California cannot ban artificial turf.
I'm sorry, we're going to go ahead and move that to item 6. That's 6 under
Oh,
waste.
I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's quite all right, because we have 2 other public comments we need to read for that one. That's why.
Right.
Thanks so much. All right, so we'll go ahead and bottle bill issues. Commissioners Ward and Valle, anything to report on that 2-person committee?
We've started to, our plan is to update the recommendations in the letter. We're in the process of reviewing that and discussing with informed folks, but we don't have anything to present to the commission at.
Okay, I would highly encourage, if we are going to do something for December, because this bottle bill is a constant point of discussion, that we get them discussed as early as possible. So if there's anything you can do for the next meeting, that would be fabulous. Knowing we have nothing else on our plate, right? Thank you very much. And then 4 is the liaison with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. We were originally going to have a presentation. We agreed not to do that, to get an update from Toyota and Lapis on what's happening in Oregon.
We're going to pass this time.
Very good. Thank you very much. Carpet and flooring, Davis and Sanborn. I don't believe we've done anything with that, John, so we can pass. Yeah.
Yeah, we can pass, but I need to say I was confused, and I thought the artificial turf was part of the carpet and flooring discussion. So I actually reached out to Department of I can't remember. Oh yeah, Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. And when we get to that topic, but I just want to clarify that that's not part of our work, and then I can share some information that I got back from OEA.
Well, the good news is it's the next item, so you might as well just go ahead and share.
So the CalRecycle contracted with the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment to do an analysis of the health risks associated with artificial turf, which because of the tire content. So this is on athletic fields, playgrounds. I'm not sure it's the same thing. That was going to be one of my questions to OEA, as what you're seeing installed, artificial grass, right? So there's synthetic turf, there's artificial grass. A lot of the research that I saw had to do with the synthetic turf. Nonetheless, OEA, I have the contact there. I will forward that to Commissioners Ward and Schneider. The deputy director at OEA responded to my query, and David Edwards, and so he's willing to follow up if you want. But I think you want to take a look at the background data that OEA already has, and I'll share that link. But again, I'm not sure that synthetic turf and artificial grass are the same thing. This is really around the tire content. And they have an outstanding report due that he hoped would be wrapped up by the end of this year.
Thank you.
I'll forward.
Thank you. And then Commissioner Lapis, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the OEHA report is focused on sports field, specifically sports fields. So it would not be the same issue as residential artificial turf.
Yeah, I don't think it does either, but it's as close as I could find. And a lot of the information that's out there confuses the terms, and it's important to focus on what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and move on now to single-use plastics and artificial turf, Schneider and Ward. So before we get into that, let's read the 2 public comments specific to this item, and then we can have the members give an update.
Hi, thank you, Chair Sanborn. The first comment is from Diana Conway of Safe Healthy Playing Fields Incorporated. Synthetic turf fields are not recyclable anywhere in the US. Our 501c3 all volunteer nonprofit has said this for over a decade, and industry has finally conceded we are right. In April 2021, when asked how many used syn turfs were ever recycled in the US, the rep for 10 Kate, a global syn turf manufacturer, stated during a public hearing, the answer is none. Since 1966, ever. Today, we know that there are over 15,000 thin turf fields in the ground right now and over 1,000 being installed annually per the industry trade group STC. We believe those numbers are low. The scale of waste is staggering. At end of life, each one is 250 plus tons of mixed toxic plastic waste with nowhere to go. To restate, sin turf cannot be recycled anywhere in the US. It is being illegally dumped all over the US and Europe, as we have helped document in stories picked up by Salon. That is the end of the 150-word comment. The entire comment is published online.
Can you repeat what the name of the group was that Diana's from?
Safe, Healthy, Plain Fields Incorporated.
That's interesting. Okay, so we've had a comment previously from David Bender that he is recycling it. So David Bender, if you could provide any data, because it sounds like your two comments directly conflict. All right, and what was the second comment, please?
And the second comment is from Diane Wolke from Safe, Healthy, Plain Fields. There's nowhere in the US where synthetic turf is recycled. The industry itself has admitted this in various public recorded meetings. I would ask that Mr. Bender provide proof of his ability to do this, clarify the number of turf fields he has recycled, and the resulting products made from the recycled mixed plastic that contains such additives as flame retardants, PFAS, and much more. That is the end of the comment.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll turn it over now to Commissioners Ward and Schneider.
Thank you. I'd like to share my screen if I might. We'll try to pull up the thing I've uploaded on single-use plastic strategies. Hopefully you can all see that at this point. Try to zoom in a little bit more. How's that? Okay, so in general, based on our previous conversations, I was not sensing that there was much momentum building towards consensus on the resin focused strategies, but I thought I'd provide an overview of different potential policy options to address single-use plastics, as there is both some overlap and I could use Commission guidance in terms of which kind of policies you're willing to entertain and pursue. These policies address all of the Commission goals in that essentially single-use plastics are an affront to the 75% recycling goal. And I also uploaded to the folder for this meeting the Plastic Waste Makers Index from the Minderoo Foundation, which is a really excellent report. But the 5 core findings of this are that 20 polymer producers accounted for more than half of all single-use plastic waste generated globally, and the top 100 accounted for 90%. Major global investors and banks are enabling single-use plastics use and expansion, and there's been a collective industry failure to transition away from fossil fuel-based feedstocks, and in fact, even the so-called biodegradable plastics increase customer confusion. Planned expansion of virgin polymer production capacity threatens to overwhelm hopes of a circular plastics economy. And this is really my focus of motivation, in that as these new plants are being built and these virgin polymers are being put into single-use plastics, it doesn't matter how much we try to qualify what is recovered and what is recycled. We're going to be overwhelmed by a tsunami of additional single-use plastic products unless we take this on. And it is an entrenched geopolitical problem, namely that a lot of the virgin resins are produced in essentially developed countries and then shipped to developing countries that are not really have capacity for recovering those materials or managing their potential misuse. So this leads us to the focus on potential resin-based strategies. And so I've listed 7 different policy strategies. The first is a resin focus, namely, we'll be looking at some kind of engagement with the producers, investors, and financial institutions to encourage such entities to acknowledge and reduce the negative environmental and social consequences of using those resins in single-use packages. This would take advantages of the Commission's unique voice And it's really important that we find a way to alter the perception of these investments, because these investments are expanding the use of those resins, which then leads to more single-use products, which leads to more challenges for the goals of. Another approach is producer responsibility. Producer responsibility generally is focused on producers of specific products or functions. But in the case of plastic resins, there is the potential of looking at producer responsibility and a resin focus. And I haven't explored that much, and I haven't seen examples of such policies, but it seems like that is a potential nexus. Then you've got the deposit and redemption systems that we're somewhat more familiar with. And while, for instance, California's AB 2020, the bottle bill was specifically named as a litter abatement program, at that time, a lot of the litter was associated with beverage containers. And I think we can all acknowledge, if you just drive down any road, now that the products that are and the materials that are on the roadsides and sources of litter has diversified significantly, and it's not just bottles and cans anymore, it's all sorts of materials. Then you could ban products or functions. This is the kind of thing where you see the straw bans, bans on distribution of single-use plastic straws and cutlery, that sort of thing. Then you've got additional charges for single use or discounts for refillables. Now we're getting into more the local initiatives, but these are in place in some places. There's also the potential for training and professional certification, so that folks who, say, the International Organization of Packaging Professionals could be an ally in trying to make sure that folks who are designing products have at least had some training in what is recyclable, what is not, what sort of design decisions in designing a product or package can it foster or impede recycling recovery. And then you've got procurement and program funding, such as the state agency Buy It, Recycle campaign. And finally, you've got most of what we're currently dealing with, which is control and cleanup. And this is, while a very important element, I think Jan Dell of the last beach cleanup will acknowledge that if this is our only strategy, there will never be a last beach cleanup. We're always going to be doing it the following year. So I throw these all out there for commission discussion and guidance in terms of what policies would you be interested in having us further develop and entertain. And in light of the discussions on both synthetic turf and say single use or specific products such as inkjet cartridges, I mean, all of those are a subset of overall what policies do you want to pursue with respect to the use of virgin resins for single-use plastics. That is, in my mind, the core question. So I'll stop sharing my screen and open it up for feedback.
Thank you. Looks like we have, I think it goes back to Commissioner Lapis. Is that right? Or is it Davis?
Yeah, I think it was me. And I was going to respond to the comment, but I do want to follow up with that too. Just real quickly, I think the comment, again, is that confusion about artificial grass and athletic fields and turf. But when I looked at some of the industry data that I think was referenced in the comment, they use reuse and recycling. So when you dig into that, it's donating the old playground, cutting it up into smaller bits and getting it out there. That's what they were calling recycling in the industry. I'm not sure that's what the comment from the carpet recycling company is, but so that was my initial comment. That I think, this is really good focus. There's a new report that came from Bennington College. I think their project is called Beyond Plastic, that you might want to reference, because it basically projects the impact of plastic production is going to exceed the greenhouse gas impacts of coal, if it hasn't already, at least in the U.S. And I think it's we can't recycle our way out of it, and there was in the federal statute, there was a moratorium on new plastic production. I think at some point, we from a waste reduction standpoint, if nothing else, we have to shut off that stream. And the Bennington report, I think, is something you want to look at to include as background, because it was pretty chilling to read their finding. And it was written by a former EPA administrator, so who leads the projects. And Bennington College, it's called Beyond Plastic.
I can put it in the, we can post it, because it's they're having a whole webinar about that report actually this week.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you. And then Commissioner Sky, and then Commissioner Madrano.
Thanks. So I'll focus my comments on the actual policy document, and I think it does reflect one of the challenges of the shift away from the subcommittees to two-person committees and the full commission. There isn't necessarily like a one-size-fits-all solution for single-use plastics. There would be different policy recommendations that I think would be a better fit for different types of single-use plastics. And synthetic turf is a good example. Since it's already exists, we probably need to have some kind of a producer responsibility model, but I think there'd be a good argument to phasing out entirely because of some of the challenges of recycling. What I'd really like to do is empower our two-person committee to make some of those more specific recommendations for categories of single-use plastics, but I think it's incumbent on the commission to provide a recommendation. I just want to overarchingly say I completely agree with you, Commissioner Ward, about the importance of this issue, that it does absolutely undermine our goals to reach a circular economy. And we kind of have this tidal wave of increasing plastic products that's going to hit us. And we're already seeing the result of it if you look at our statewide recycling rates over the last 10 years. So it's very much central to the work of this commission. And I think in my mind, it's an all of the above strategy. We need to implement probably all of the solutions that was in your policy, but tailor it to certain categories. And it might be kind of a mix and match approach for some of the more difficult and more challenging categories of single-use plastics.
I would second that, and then just say it's a lot. So you just have to take on what you can do and do well. And then, we can update the report or the recommendations later, be more specific.
Well, if I might respond, that was specifically why I recommended the resin-focused strategy, looking at what our capacities are and what we can do. We can send out 100 letters. And we can start fostering that larger discussion. And that's what we can achieve with the efforts we have. When we start to talk about the detailed regulations about synthetic turf, the detailed regulations about printer cartridges, I'm going to get overwhelmed. I'm not going to get to all of the things that we all want to get to. So focusing efforts, that's part of why, again, I'd recommend everybody take a look at that Minderoo report. It really emphasizes this is a production issue. If we do not address the overwhelming planned expansion of that production, we're not going to win this fight.
I'd also encourage everybody to look at SB 54, which is legislation to get to source reduction and targets of packaging, including plastics, next year. And I think that is an attempt at trying to get to a broader solution instead of picking everything off one at a time, which will take decades, and we don't have that much time. So that's another thought, is to look at that as something to comment on as well. Commissioner Madrano, then Schneider, then Toyota, please.
Yeah, congratulations, Commissioners Ward and Schneider, for this great work, a great report. I certainly do support an additional charges approach to this. I mean, we have to be able to give us an equal playing field to the virgin plastic production. So this will help with the resources that are needed for the enforcement, but also coupled with additional single-use products. I know we talked about an overall approach, but there's a lot of other single-use products that are besides plastics that are be used, and there's a potential for strong recycling markets, and obviously extended producer responsibility approach as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Schneider, then Toyota.
Thank you. When Ted first started talking to me about the resin approach, it took me a while to grasp it. But again, as he said, we can do 100 letters. I would throw into it, we had talked as a commission as we go forward with our policies of trying to find funding mechanisms. So if you look at California's extractive industries and you look at oil and gas, we are one of the few states that do not charge a fee for that extractive industry. So a piece of legislative or a legislative concept that could come out of the resin concept is California. It is finally time, and it's been tried in multiple bills in the past, to put a fee on oil and gas extraction, because we all know that the oil and gas companies are switching to plastics to maintain market share. So we can look at it in that perspective. So I like the idea of us trying to look way at the top or the bottom, depending on how we look at it. It's the highest best use of our time on that. In terms of the individual materials that we might look at under single stream, in the case of synthetic turf, that rose to the top because it became a big issue for my city and a couple of other cities in California, and we'll come to that. But I just like the reuse takeout food packaging, that's already a partial law. It's now clarifying it in my county. It is a mandate. So I think some of the single-use stuff will continue to rise to the top, whether it's our residents driving it or our local governments who have to pay for it through their garbage companies. It'll continue to rise. So it's that two processes going simultaneously.
Thank you, Commissioner Toyota.
I would just like to add that I like the resin approach as well. And plastics is a major conversation in stormwater right now with microplastics and drinking water, and they are all scrambling, and they're also all realizing that we can't do anything once it's in the water. We're never going to be able to control it. We have to go to the top. And if it's all right with you, Commissioner Ward, I also do a subcommittee with the stormwater for true source control, which would be like the resin approach, to talk to them about what you have here and possibly get some feedback from them as well. But they would be great partners in this because they all realize as well that we need to move this way. And if we do that together, we'll be a lot stronger.
Yeah, and I would just add that EPR to me is an approach for products that we want to see exist. If there are products that are dangerous or undermining our goals or unsustainable, that's all. I mean, why make the producers be responsible for something we're going to want them to, why create that infrastructure if we don't necessarily want it to begin with? So that's just something to think about.
So that somewhat, I still don't feel like I could bring something back that would necessarily gain consensus. But one of the concepts that I'd like to try to find a way to develop, which is a resin-focused EPR approach. Like I said, to my knowledge, I don't know of a producer responsibility program that isn't focused on either a product or a function. In this case, it would be focused on a specific resin type. But it's something I haven't explored. I'm not even sure how it would be developed, but it would take a bit of time. So I'm trying to figure out what is the best way. The other option I didn't throw out there, and it taps into Commissioner Medrano's suggestion on additional charges, which is there is a ballot initiative that's going to come up in 2022, and another potential response would be essentially starting to look at that ballot initiative with the eye towards, if it passes, what additional advice would we give to address single-use plastics? Because I think it's fair to say that no matter what we come up with as a strategy to address single-use plastics, if that ballot initiative passes, the conversation will change.
Yeah, I think SB 54 and the ballot measure are the closest things we've seen to trying to get at this. So, and since they're both going to happen as of now, unless the ballot initiative is pulled, and I think the last day they can pull it is in June, then maybe that's something to just talk around and address in our conversations.
All
right.
So in summary, I don't think this is going to be ready for any kind of policy in the January report, but we'd be looking towards the July report. And I appreciate the feedback. And with this overview, I guess my recommendation is that I have the opportunity to move at least the resin-focused EPR discussion back to the EPR and HHW two-person committee of myself and Chair.
I'm happy to do that. I just don't understand how we do it for a resin.
I don't know. I don't know either. We're being creative here.
Okay. And then Commissioner Davis, you want to say something?
Yeah, just I'm a little uncomfortable with a definition of single use that includes carpet, synthetic turf. There's a concept in accounting of capitalizing items, and I want to say it's a 2 or 3 year life, and that's I just calling carpet a single use product seems maybe a reach, and it's going to confuse the discussions. So, something to think about.
Good point. Do you want to move it back to carpet and flooring? Because I think I mean, they are more durable. They're not really single.
Yeah, they're durable. I mean, they're not something you use once and throw away. And then the focus of this policy can be more precise when it talks about single use, and maybe the initiative may have a definition. AB 54 probably had a definition.
Through the chair, that's problematic given that the amount of research I've already done on this, and golly, people from around the world sending me the studies, the reports. I'm not on that subcommittee. Is it possible to bring it to the Waste Prevention Committee? One of the things I've learned, Commissioner Davis, is the way synthetic turf is being sold in the residential market is you won't have to worry about this for forever. Depending on the quality of the particular synthetic turf is how long it's going to last, how much sun it's going to get, how hot the temperatures are. It is very likely that it has to be replaced, not like a bottled water, but much more within a year or two. And yet it's being sold as a durable product when it isn't really durable on that. So I would rather this not get taken out from my hands, given that my city is working on it and I've done the work, to move it over to carpet and flooring.
Yeah, I'm fine not moving it to carpet and flooring.
Believe me, I'm fine with it too. And
Okay.
so why don't we go ahead and move it to your other waste prevention? But I would suggest this, though, that it would be really great to have at least one waste prevention policy going for January, because there's just a lot going on. It's the highest on the hierarchy, and I'm nervous that we still really, outside of the refillables last year and the bottle bill, we haven't really tackled it. We haven't gotten good, outline, and it's hard. It's why it hasn't happened before as far as legislation.
Reasonably, Chair Sanborn, I think there are two, if I can just get a few hours of uninterrupted time to put it into the commission's format. So the reusable takeout food packaging, which is going to be largely based on San Mateo County, which has enacted the ordinance, and it's countywide, individual cities, and then the synthetic turf. Because under our moratorium, we only have 45 days. Law requires certain things have to happen in a certain time frame. So these things are moving.
Okay, great.
They're moving because they have to be moving.
Okay, well, if we could, yeah, it would just be great, because we literally have 3 meetings left, and we have to have two of them of the readings. So
well, my goal is to try to get both of those to you, or posted, as Ted is better at doing, by a week Friday.
Okay, fantastic. That's awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to have to move on to the next item, which is right to repair. And this is one that...
Well, actually, I'm sorry, artificial turf. I had one question since I've got Nick here. It turns out that the major reason synthetic turf, and I'm looking at it residentially right now, can't be banned is SB 974, 2016. It was inserted into an omnibus bill, and it prevents the banning of synthetic turf. And Chair Chair Sanborn suggested I try to find the author, but finding the author of an omnibus bill is a little trickier.
Yeah.
So Nick,
If
if
you
you
could
could help me with that offline, that would be great.
That would be
I
great.
can, and we never worked on it, but I happened to be on the board of an HOA at the time, and I think it came during one of the droughts in order to prohibit HOAs and local governments from prohibiting synthetic turf for drought reasons.
Right.
Okay.
No, it
I'll let
definitely
you guys
comes
handle
from the
this.
water side.
We have to keep moving. I really appreciate it. All right, thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and move on to right to repair. And Commissioner Davis, I think you have given us a proposal and it's been uploaded. You're muted.
I'm sorry.
John?
Do you want me to share my screen or summarize what's in there?
Why don't you summarize and then.
Okay. Well, essentially, there's a lot of movement recently on right to repair at the federal level. President Biden issued an executive order directing that all federal agencies look at what they can do to promote right to repair. And the Federal Trade Commission came out with some findings in a report. So they're going to ramp up their enforcement against repair restrictions, but they also indicated that they looked at a lot of industry claims, and it's the industry claims that have held up legislation, not just in California, but in everywhere except I think the New York Senate approved legislation, but it failed to reach the second house. So, but the industry makes a lot of claims about their concerns of copyright violation and mishandling of devices. Anyway, the FTC looked at those claims and just rejected them. The report says, although manufacturers had offered numerous explanations for their repair restrictions, the majority are not supported by the record. FTC also in their report says they stand ready to work with legislators, either at the state or federal level, in order to assure that consumers have choices when they need to repair products that they purchase and own. So part of the recommendation is to take them up on that the California legislature should work with the Federal Trade Commission, who looked extensively at the sorts of claims that have impacted the effort to bring right to repair to California, and rejected nearly all of them. So that's part of the recommendation. We had language in two other policies before the commission that did not move. And so this is kind of an updated referral back to that language. One was on the state agency Buy Recycle campaign. And we had very specific language about inclusion of repair considerations in state procurement. So I think it's timely to do that and possibly even refer to the federal executive order and encourage the federal government to do the same. I think our thoughts on the state agency recommendation was to ask for repair information, and that the availability of repair be a consideration in state purchases, so that, you know, essentially, if the state's buying mobile phones, they should ask the vendors what can these phones be repaired, and if so, by who, and what's the cost, for example, of replacing a battery. So that's we bring back that inclusion of the repair consideration in state procurement, and it's kind of a life cycle pricing issue. And then also we had a labeling recommendation regarding repairability that included a couple of things. One was a reference to the French model, for repairability, and where it's a labeling. It's not a requirement, but that products sold would be labeled as to their repairability scores. And the French use a 0 to 10 model. iFixit uses a 0 to 10 model. iFixit does its own scoring. The French model allows manufacturers to score, but they have to be able to substantiate the scoring. And what I understand has been found is that manufacturers have begun to open up and make changes to their repairability policies in order to get higher scores, that the scores are affecting the sales. So we bring back that labeling recommendation as well. So it's really a three-part recommendation that the legislature reach out to the Federal Trade Commission, that repair consideration be part of state procurement, and that product repairability labeling.
John, you're gonna have to,
California.
just get to the point. We've just got a few minutes left, please.
Okay, all right. Well, those are the recommendations.
Okay, so are there any, let's see, I have to back up because there's public comment, apparently 2 public comments on the previous item, and we should always hear public comment. So if you could go ahead and read those, and then we'll get back to this right to repair item.
Thank you, Chair Steinborn. The first comment is from Diane Wilkie, Safe Healthy Playing Field Incorporated. Residential, commercial, and sports fields are all made from the same plastic resin pellets. There is variation in the use of terminology, but they all are primarily made by the same manufacturers as household carpets, and primarily in Dalton and Calhoun, Georgia. The microplastics pollution from these plastic carpets is a global issue being called out around the world, and then they provided a hyperlink to a website. That's the end of the first comment. The second comment is from Laura Rosenberg-Hader from Presidents Against Fracking, CEJC, and Sierra Club. Synthetic grass turf should be illegal, especially at higher elevations. Plastics decompose from the UV rays in the sunlight, releasing PCBs. Then mice shred plastic, releasing dust in an attempt to make a nest. Nearby, that mouse was found dead. That's the end of the comments. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting more and more concerned about this throwing plastic all over the place and leaving it outside. I think. Thank you for your comments. And if you have any policy suggestions,
through the chair, sorry to interrupt. For
well,
the
actually,
people that
can I just ask a question, because you tend to use through the chair and interrupt people. So
oh, I'm sorry.
Just at least wait till somebody's finished. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Go ahead.
To the people who've written in and the people listening, feel free to send me the studies and impacts in that so that I can add it to the document. And typically, Chair, you kind of assign people who've written in to different commission members. You haven't done that in this case. Do you want me to take this on?
Well, again, we're in that 2-person committee mode. So it's really, they need to just give you information, and then you present a policy at a public meeting where they can provide feedback, but we're not allowed to do these one-off behind the scenes conversations outside of when we had larger committees, we were able, well, not even then really, we probably shouldn't have been doing that. So, it's really 2 persons, that's it. And that includes people outside of the commission. So just ask them to give the information to you, and you can read the public comments that were posted and any links that they give us, and then you can develop a policy and bring it back to the public at a public meeting. Thank you. Okay, so we've got the 2 public comments read into the record. We're running out of time to get to our next item, which is very common and why we need to pace ourselves. So why don't we go ahead and open discussion on this right to repair policy? Is there anyone that has a comment on this right to repair policy? Because I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Commissioner Lapis.
I really like the recommendations. I was wondering if it makes sense to recommend something like the French model in California beyond the procurement and beyond the labeling, although I guess maybe that is labeling. But that's kind of an interesting approach that I hadn't really heard of before. I'd love to see a recommendation around that.
Yeah, we could strengthen the recommendation. I think the recommendation was a little bit, there's a French model, there's iFixit, do you have a third party verification, or do manufacturers make their own claims, which is the French model. So the recommendation wasn't specific as to which would be preferred, but we could, I think a third party is better.
And then on the first suggestion on the legislature interacting with the FTC, I'm not sure there's really a process for the legislature to do that. And so just logistically, I'm not sure that makes sense, but maybe I misinterpreted what you were suggesting.
I guess I was thinking it would be, a consultant who might listen to what the FTC had to say about these claims that, constantly arise. And the FTC at least batted down a number of them, although their report doesn't really go into depth. But I think somebody who's considering the impacts of legislation, when you read the reports on the legislation, those claims from manufacturers are consistent across the U.S. At some point, we need to whittle away on the claims that just have no validity, and the FTC has done that.
So I agree with all that. I'm just not totally clear on what the policy recommendation would be there.
Okay.
I second Nick's comment.
We'll try to redraft that. Commissioner Ward,
Well,
I can take a look.
Is already taking up the green guides. And if we made a specific recommendation to CalRecycle or the legislature that they should advise the FTC during these updates that right to repair be key, maybe even in labeling, like things could be labeled that they're repairable. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah, that was part of our labeling recommendation included. But
Yeah, that's why I think it's already included in other policies, right?
Yeah. But it wasn't, to speak to what Commissioner Lapis said, it wasn't a specific approach. It gave a couple of examples of approaches.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Does anybody else have a comment on this? I think I have to digest it a little bit more. Okay, I don't see any other comments. So this is basically we'll put this as the first reading, since even though it was posted, this is the first time we've really discussed it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And then
we'll come back with some more specific language on the recommendation.
I do think this is fundamental to source reduction too, so I really, really appreciate you guys putting the time in on this.
No, this is a huge issue.
Yeah.
When you can't replace the battery in your phone without sending it to Michigan,
I think I've said it, when I bought a Hoover vacuum, it's because there was a Hoover store down the street and I thought they'd repair it. And when the first time it broke, I took it in there and they said, oh, you should just buy this other cheap one. There's no reason. And I'm like, I bought it so it was repairable. They don't even want to repair them anymore. It was really unfortunate. And it was a sign of where we are and we've got to push back. Okay, so right to repair. Thank you very much for that. Kadena Davis, methane emission reductions. We're going to have to go really fast. Just say pass if you don't have anything.
Yeah, well, this was introduced at the last meeting. There were no comments on it. We reformatted it for you, but basically it's to ask that CalRecycle and the ARP update the compost emission reduction factors to use methane as a short-lived climate pollutant, which dramatically increases the impacts of compost emission reduction, and then ask that CalRecycle in their CEQA responsibilities as a responsible agency notify the people preparing environmental reviews of compost facilities of that emission reduction factor. That's the essence of it, and let that become part of the analysis. I'm still seeing analyses that say, here's the emissions from a compost facility, but nothing about the emission reduction. And CEQA asks that you consider impacts, positive and negative, of a project. So it's a way to try to tell a better story about the methane emission and increase it to the short life climate pollutant, which is the whole 1383 focus.
Okay, we're now over schedule, so I'm just going to point that out. Is there anybody that has any comments on the methane emissions policy draft? And I see comment from Commissioner Sky and Kabakov, and then we'll have to go back to Rate to Repair for a public comment.
Very briefly, I think it's a good policy. The only comment I have is it's just mentioning composting, and that's not the only option for managing, for example, food waste. So it should be just more broad to say facilities that divert organic waste.
Yeah, the focus on the compost emission reduction factors is compost emission reduction, and there's a programmatic EIR for anaerobic digestion. There's other issues like rescuing food, but we don't have factors out there for that. So I think that was the reason for the narrow focus. It's something that can be done administratively. But if we could try to broaden it. Not sure how to do it.
I think just in a few places you can mention that there are other opportunities for diverting organic waste that should also get that benefit of showing the net reductions from those emissions.
Yeah, if we don't have to dive into the background, we could just indicate that they should look at the anaerobic digestion EIR, the master EIR, and look at the factors they use for food recovery and translate those to methane reduction as well, or short life methane.
Okay, Commissioner Kapikoff.
Yeah, good morning, commissioners. This is an extremely important policy for compliance with 1383. And as a facility operator who went through this process, I realized what John Davis's goal is. There's not a lot of time left, and I've got a lot to say on this item. First of all, it was not introduced last meeting. It was mentioned, not read, not discussed. So this is really the first reading or looking at this policy recommendation. John, I'll say I don't know if it goes far enough. That's kind of where I'll start out. There's some things going on with the CalRecycle, the HDR study that's in process now for the VOC emissions, GHG emissions of composting facilities. There is the 2017 study that you mentioned. There's also the CAPCO one. I think what we're looking at is when you the goals of 1383 are to reduce the amount of food waste going into landfill and put them in either an AD or a food waste, some food waste diversion processing facility like Kobe mentioned. There's multiple ones you can get rid of it. This one specifically looks at the composting. And one of the things that we encountered when we put the composting facility up is that we took 100% emissions that were going into a landfill or an open row composting facility. We brought it into a controlled environment and reduced the VOCs by 95%. And when you do that, your offsets you have to pay for the 5% that you emit. You don't get any credit for the 95% that you reduced. And I think this is the goal of this policy, is to find ways to how do you put a pin on that 95% that were reduced. And so there's nothing there that takes that into consideration during the process. So there's a broader thing with CEQA, which is all the permitting, and then specifically the local air districts, which is where your air permit comes in from. And so how do we capture? There's multiple ways of measuring. there's the ratios that are out there that are all over the board. So if you look at the San Joaquin Valley, you have a different ratio for food emissions factor for 1 ton. You go to South Coast, they're different. Up north is different. And how do we capture that? So that study, I think that HDR is doing, John, right now, is supposed to come out in the spring with some guidance for Cal Recycle. So, you know, I love the fact that you're looking at the essential public service for composting facilities, whether we broaden that up, Kobe, to handle, you know, organics processing facilities. That's a bigger conversation, but you know, it comes down to the local air districts and what they consider and what their factors are and what their rules are. It's not a statewide kind of methodology when you have to deal with it locally. And so and Cal Recycle is aware of that. I had years of discussion with them on our facility. So how do we standardize it so the local guys can actually use that data and implement that data? The life cycle is a little bit different. Life cycle has the collection aspect of the green waste to a transfer station, to the composting facility, technology in the composting facility, and then back out to where it was used. That's the life cycle. And so, you know, when we look at a composting facility, they don't look at the life cycle. They look at the facility itself. So I don't know how those two correlate, and I don't know if we want to blend those two because it looks at the CEQA permitting for the whole project itself, but we're looking at you know, GHG reductions on the facility, not the whole process. So I could probably talk about this for a half hour, and I don't know if we have time today to talk about this. And those are, and then the offsets, right? What do we do with offsets? What do we do with offset banking for that 95%? Because it's there, right? We've reduced 95% of the VOCs, and there's no credit system for that facility anywhere. And that's the challenge of getting these things up and running in California right now.
Yeah, and just quickly, and I know we need to move on, but I think the focus, this really started at market development. We stopped it because we knew the compost committee was talking about it, or the organics committee. I think the narrow focus on updating the compost emission factors to include methane as a short life pollutant rather than convert it to CO2. That was the intent. The language some of the language that's in there, and you're right, it probably went over what we needed to do on the essential public service, for example. That was I'm
really sorry, but we're going to have to wrap this up, and we're going to probably have to do what we did last time and move things to the top. So this is where we will really do have to think next year in the January item as to how much we're taking on, how much time everybody realistically has to put into these things, and if we want to go back to committees or if we want to keep it as 2-person. So
and we might want to consider when we have some written recommendations that we take those up and then move, kind of move down
that's basically what we did. I mean, there was very little discussion on the other items, and we still did the ones we had. Yeah. In fact, we've got thermoforms, John, that we haven't even. So I think next meeting we're going to have to start with thermoforms, and I know there's nothing to report on construction and demolition, and if there's anything on the organics, quickly touch on that. But is this enough to at least give you some feedback?
Yeah, we'll take a stab at trying to narrow. I think on this one, narrowing the focus would be my goal. But I know Commissioner Kalvikoff and Oseguera are dealing with the broader issue and sensitive to that. So.
And it'll to help make the meetings go faster. It'll really help if everybody can get their stuff, their PowerPoints and everything to us 3 days before the meetings, and we can get them uploaded, and then everybody has time to really digest them and bring their questions to the meeting. That's really what the meeting should be for, because instead of going through every little detail or word of a policy. So anyway, great work, and thank you, because it is a very important policy, as Commissioner Kalvikoff said. Very, very important, especially with COP this week. Why don't we go back real quick? We've got to read a couple of public comments, and then we'll have to get to the OPC item with Zoe.
Thank you, Chair Sanborn. The first comment is from Laura Rosenberg-Hader. My plastic tarp decomposed and tore easily after 2 years outdoors in the mountains in the sun. That's the end of the first comment. The second comment is from Peter Mui from Fix-It Clinic. One weakness in France's index of durability as currently implemented is that the durability number is manufacturer determined. Fix-It Clinic is a founding member of the Global Open Repair Alliance, and we're documenting and collecting end consumer field data in California and beyond on the true durability and repairability of items once they're in service. That's the end of the comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I agree with you on the tarps. I find those little strips of blue plastic all over my neighborhood, all over Tahoe, because people wrap their boats and it's freezing and it breaks up and it's a mess. Did anybody else have a comment? Did I hear?
Yeah, just I agree with Peter's assessment that the industry imposed, the French method, that's one of the drawbacks, but
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that you must say before we move on from the two-person committees and organics that haven't had a chance to speak? Commissioner Ward.
Yeah, briefly on the report committee, anyone who worked on a policy last round that came into the July report, we need you to revisit that policy. And if you have any update that you want to include in the January report, we need that by next Wednesday. And the last possible date would be the 24th. So if you worked on any policy, please review that. If you got any updates, we've got to move it forward. Otherwise, we don't have the time for the 2 readings. We're probably going to add a paragraph or 2 about the sustainability and the structure of the commission and the burnout we're all experiencing. And but in general, we're looking for the January report probably to be pretty thin and focused on the policies that we're able to bring forward. That's what I got.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Sky.
Just very briefly, I want to recommend for the two-person committee that Commissioner Osigura and I are leading to update the name Drop Organic Materials and call it the Renewable and Recyclable Technologies Committee, so that it addresses using advanced technologies to recover materials for recycling.
Is that okay, Commissioner? So Osigura, you're okay with that recommendation?
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay, so it'll read Renewable and Recyclable Technologies is the two-person committee. Okay, is there anybody that has any issue with that? Okay, you've got a new name. Thank you very much. And that's a really important committee too. In fact, there's something that was brought to my attention I want to forward to you, a new technology coming out of Berkeley Labs. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move quickly now to agenda item 7, which is very important. This is the feedback we were starting to give on the education and outreach presentation that we were given by CalRecycle staff at the last meeting. Again, I have asked CalRecycle to please make sure that we have the presentations 3 days in advance so everybody has time to look at them, even if they're on the agenda, because there was a lot of comments and we didn't really get through everything because people had seen it for the first time live. So Zoe, I don't know, I reposted it on the Google document for this meeting so everybody in the public could follow. Did you want to go ahead and I know you've spent a lot of time on this and reviewed the video, and I could turn it over to you to start, and then we can ask that the commissioners provide some more input.
Sure, and I'll try to keep this as short as possible, but just want to repeat back what we heard from you all last week to make sure that we're hearing things correctly and capturing things correctly, and also level set on a few issues just to provide a reminder as to where the education and outreach campaign is. I know we haven't given that presentation in over a year and a lot's happened since then. So first of all, I just want to thank you all for fulfilling your charge to provide feedback to us on public messaging designed to encourage proper recycling and to minimize contamination in curbside recycling programs. We heard a lot of that last week and it was greatly appreciated. As Heidi mentioned, I, along with a number of other folks here at CalRecycle, have rewatched the video from last week. We want to make sure we captured your comments and input for consideration in our various education and outreach work that we're doing at the department. Your input is not only helpful for our overall education and outreach campaign, but also for the education and outreach that we conduct regularly for our specific statutorily mandated programs. Heard a lot about 1383 last week. As you know, implementation is just weeks away now, so that's very much appreciated as we're working with
all the regulated entities in rolling that out. And overall, I think we're committed to similar goals. And one of those main ones is reducing contamination in all of our recycling streams, and also reducing waste to the extent possible. So very much appreciate all the input that you've provided on public messaging thus far, including the participation in the survey for the education outreach campaign, which was many months back now, but that was considered by the consultant and by us in the development of the campaign and where we are today. So I work closely with our Office of Public Affairs and the rest of the CalRecycle executive team, and we all support the Department's public messaging, education, and outreach work. Wanted to bring up that our local assistance and market development group handles much of the education and outreach at the local level. And there was a lot of input last week that was specific to that, which is very helpful for us as well. At the last meeting, we heard the Commission would like to be more engaged in CalRecycle's public messaging and statewide outreach, and CalRecycle welcomes all of your feedback across all of our public messaging programs. As you know, we're constantly updating our website, social media, the public meetings were discussed last week, the education and outreach campaign, and we can take this feedback here or through your policy proposals too, as sometimes there needs to be a policy recommendation to impact the way in which we can conduct education and outreach and what we're able to conduct education and outreach on. So let's see, where am I? Okay. So at the Commission's last meeting, there was discussion specific to the campaign, and I want to summarize those high-level takeaways to ensure we properly capture them and also to solicit more input today. But before I go into that, I want to make sure you have that level set, that awareness of where we are in the campaign, because I think that'll be helpful in moving forward. So the purpose of the campaign, and Maria hit on this last week, is to reduce the contamination of bottles and cans and to introduce statewide organic waste recycling. And one of the reasons for this is because the campaign is funded so much from our beverage container recycling program. So the contract was awarded to Runyon Saltzman in 2019, so a few years back. And since the contract was awarded, a number of activities have been completed. The main ones were the consultant conducted a considerable amount of research, which included discussions with a number of stakeholders within California, a number of jurisdictions, MRFs and haulers. They held focus groups and disseminated surveys to try to get as wide of a reach as possible throughout the state. And the results of that is what we're preparing to share with you. We should be getting that out really soon. And currently, the consultant is working on strategy, and that was a lot of what Maria was talking about last week. So once again, thank you for your feedback that you provided through the survey and the feedback last week and through various other meetings. So I'm going to go over some of what we heard last week to make sure we captured it correctly, and also some responses to some of the questions that you had. Already mentioned, we're going to be getting the research findings out to you all in the very near term. We heard that you emphasized the importance of clear messaging to reduce contamination in the recycling stream, to reduce the risks and burdens to recycling infrastructure, to reduce consumer confusion, and to increase the recycling rate in California if possible. But understanding that's a little bit of a mixed bag there. Commissioner Ward, I heard that specifically from you and want to make sure to reflect that back. So CalRecycle shares these goals to reduce contamination and increase recycling. We're going to utilize your input, not only for the campaign, but messaging across the board, once again, through our other program implementation as well. As you all know, Director Wagner is very much focused on achieving a circular economy, and all those components are critically important to doing that. We heard from many of you strong concern that CalRecycle does not want to direct people to throw specific materials, products, in trash. Notably, the commissioners relayed the importance of clarifying whether plastic bags should be put in the recycling and composting streams. So thank you for that input. And as mentioned, when Jan brought it up earlier, we are considering that and looking into ways in which it's appropriate for us to message that. Specifically, commissioners noted the need for constructive and proactive messaging about what should be recycled and not just provide general instructions to the public, such as recycle right. We agree messaging is needed to clarify what should and should not be recycled. However, as also noted by commissioners, this messaging is often at the local level instead of statewide messaging due to the diversity of curbside collection programs in California. This is one of the areas in which we're attempting to thread the needle and appreciate your input on that. And it's why through the community-based social marketing campaign, we're trying to provide some materials to jurisdictions that can be customizable as well. So broad statewide messaging allowing for some of that customization when appropriate. So your input will be used to inform the various materials that Maria presented at last week's meeting. In addition to feedback from the campaign, it was expressed that there's a need for overarching campaign to help educate constituents about SB 1383. Couldn't agree more. Thank you for that. And so CalRecycle continues to create education and outreach materials specific to 1383, both at the statewide and local levels. This is through mainly our local assistance and market development program. And on our page, you'll see many resources there. And we're always open to developing more if we get specific input on what's needed by the various members of the regulated community and beyond, you know, the public as well. So CalRecycle will provide statewide awareness. Advertising is part of the campaign to let California know that food and yard recycling is coming to their area or is in their area and needs to be utilized to align with the 1383 goals. And as mentioned, appreciate any other input that you have specific on 1383 implementation, since that's now. So to close out my time, trying to cover a lot of ground quickly so that we can get questions from you all. Some of the very specific input from you guys that would be really helpful to us, especially as we're embarking upon 1383 and getting this this feedback for ways in which to think about messaging with the statewide campaign is if you're aware of any campaigns, tools, or other educational material that have resulted in behavior change related to recycling and waste. This could be stuff that you all have done, stuff that you've seen, initiatives that you're working on, places, things that you've seen in other places outside of California. That's very, very helpful to us. And also, what education outreach tools and messaging have your organizations found to be either successful or unsuccessful in creating meaningful behavior change related to source separation or reducing contamination? So I'll stop there because I'm sure you have quite a bit of input for us and questions, but just wanted to give a broad overview of what we heard last week and some of the ways in which we're incorporating that feedback.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Does the commission have any feedback for Zoe's comments? So they're asking us for help finding PR materials that work at reducing contamination. And from the public too, you can also put those in the public comment so that we can all see it and learn from each other. Commissioner Ward and then Commissioner Osigura.
Thanks for the presentation, Zoe. Appreciate all your work on this. The short and quick of it is, I know that you're going to have different jurisdictions with different lists of what's recyclable and what's not, just because they're working with different processors. And so I think the most important element is a graphically consistent method of communicating what is recyclable and what is compostable in each community, so that people know to glance towards the blue section, to glance towards the green section, that have inconsistent graphic heavy messages. I think are going to be most helpful to the multilinguistic community.
Thanks for that, Ted. Really appreciate that.
Commissioner Osigura?
So I just wanted to thank you very much to CalRecycle for listening to the comments made by the commission. Truly appreciate that you're going to look into how else can the message be delivered regarding what goes, what contaminates, right, into those containers. Not necessarily does it always have to be, a specific type of plastic maybe was labeled differently, or an organic material that truly is not compostable, but it's also that individuals, I think in California, doing a great job, began after AB 939 to place everything into the blue container and everything into the green container. Now I'm using SB 1383. Obviously, containers are different colors right now across the state, and really we have to get folks to understand that not everything goes into that blue container, and not everything goes into that organic screen container, right? And so, anyway, I truly appreciate that you're taking a look at that and reanalyzing how the message should be. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, and then Commissioner Davis, and we've just got a couple of minutes.
Yeah, Zoe, we're doing a curbside contamination project right now, but part of that is also informing people what should go in. And, it involves door-to-door, social media. We've done our first series of cart audits, and then we're doing outreach, targeted outreach, and then going back to do another series of card audits. So when that report is finished, I'll be glad to share it with you. But we spent quite a bit of time on trying to hone the messaging about what goes in, what should go in, that positive messaging. But also, and this is, I think, the reaction I have to the previous presentation. If it doesn't go in the recycling cart, if it doesn't go in your organics collection, it goes to the landfill, right? And if we can't tell people that it goes to the landfill, in that landfill cart, you know, we're only telling half the story. So, so our focus is trying to get the stuff that should go to the landfill out of the recycling cart. And I'll be glad to share the report when we have it. We have preliminary data if anybody wants to talk about it, but it's not really out there on the public yet. But and it's based on that protocol that the Recycling Partnership developed.
Yeah, fabulous. We would absolutely love to see that. So thank you.
Yeah, you have to tell people to put it somewhere, and when I think the reaction was you can't tell people that, you know, plastic bags are better off going to the landfill or take it back to the store. But if you can't tell them to go to the landfill, it ends up in the recycling cart because it's plastic. And so we're taking a different approach, and it's got to go somewhere.
Is there anybody else that has any comments on this before we go to Commissioner Ward, who's already spoken on this? I just want to make sure everybody's had a chance to speak. Okay, very good. Commissioner Ward, and then we'll have to move on.
Yeah, just briefly, I think that is something that's somewhat a separate message than the positive campaign. I regularly encounter people who happily, proudly say, I recycle everything. And it is a constant educational challenge to say, well, then you're not doing it right. There are a few people who are doing it right and say that, but very, very few.
Okay, we do have to move on. We've only got 4 minutes left, and I'm sure we could talk about this all day, but it seems to me that I'm just going to ask the commissioner, should this particular item, as it's so important and we want to stay on top of it, do we want to make this a regularly scheduled item on the upcoming agenda so we can constantly give feedback or hear if there's anything new? Because we're going to get the survey data and we'll want to maybe give some feedback on that at the next meeting. Is that okay? Or do you think that we don't need to talk about this maybe but once a month with Cal Recycle? I'm open to suggestions because the next item is meeting summary and closing. We've already talked about the next agenda, but I guess I'd like to ask if you'd like this on the next agenda.
I would recommend monthly. I think that makes sense.
Monthly, okay. Then we can go ahead and put this on the December 1st agenda, and we'll give it another 20 minutes or so. Since we're going to 3 hours, we won't have a lot of time, but at least we keep this conversation up and share new information. So this will go on the December 1st agenda. Thank you very much, Zoe, for presenting. So just to wrap up the meeting, so what we got a lot accomplished today. We determined we're going to go to 3-hour meetings, 9 to 12, for the last 3 meetings of this calendar year. We are not going to start our new meetings of the next calendar year until January 19th, and then we'll be on that regular schedule, and we can certainly we're going to have an agenda item of at least 20 minutes that's going to rediscuss the structure of the board, when the chairs are voted on, if we want to go back to committees, all that stuff that Commissioner Don Levy raised. And we're going to start the next meeting. If it's okay with you, I'd like to make sure we get to the policies first, and only those policies that are ready and posted will be heard first. And then we can go to everything else. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, thumbs up. Very good. Okay. And we moved AstroTurf up to Waste Prevention Group. So thank you for that. So I think we got through a lot today, and we heard several policies and gave some feedback on important things like single-use plastics and methane. So I just want to thank everybody again. I know this is really hard. There's 16 of us. There's a lot to do. There's more to do than we'd ever have time to do, especially as volunteers. And I know everybody's tired and I'm tired. So I just want to thank you again for being courteous to each other and working together to do the best we can for California and advising CalRecycle and the legislature. You've done great work. So we will see you again on November 17th at 9. Thank you very much.